Hello friends. Welcome to Fictional Vortex. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto had the power of dragons, mages and gods. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. A female figure dashed through the dark forests as fast as she could, not even daring to look back. Her adrenaline levels were at their highest, and beads of sweat rolled down her face. This wasn't supposed to be happening. The boss had assured them that he could handle anything, that they would gain unimaginable power to rule the world. And now he was dead. His head had been severed from his body so fast, his blood didn't even get on the blade that had killed him. The plan was supposed to be simple: gather a group of expert rune masters, find the lost tomb, and then they would break the runes and barriers and awaken him. The legendary Black Mage, the most powerful man in the world, and most importantly, he was the teacher of the infamous Zirf. His power was so strong that he had defeated Zirf and the Dragon of Apocalypse, Acnologia, simultaneously. The demons he created put those of Zirf to utter shame, and his most powerful demon, Kurama the legendary, nine-tailed demon fox, had caused utter destruction and possessed an attack that made Acnologias look like kitty litter. She took a sharp turn to avoid slamming into a tree, but it was for naught as she tripped against a root, and rolled down a cliff, tumbling heads over heels, before crashing into a large pond. She groaned as she got up and out of the pond. He was a living legend, and easily the most powerful man alive. He was ruggedly handsome and immortal, having a 21-year-old form all the while. The man W.I.T.H. the title, Kage no Shinigami, Shadow of the Death God, the infamous mage, whose name alone was said to make infants cry in fear, and full-grown men shake in their boots, Naruto Uzumaki. And he was standing right in front of her. I'm totally fucked. She looked up at him and her heartbeat doubled. He had blonde spiky hair that spiked in all direction. He also had bangs which framed the front and sides of his face, stopping at jaw length. The tips of his hair were blood red and his hair had some red streaks visibly running through it. He had whisker-like marks on both sides of his face, giving him a feral appearance. His eyes were bright, ocean blue that seemed to look right through her. He wore a long black hooded jacket, coat hybrid, with the edges of his coat tipped W.I.T.H. neon black flames that somehow was visible despite the dark cloak. He wore a plain black t-shirt within the cloak and had Anbu edition dark pants, along with a pair of dark open-toed sandals. The young female looked up at him in awe. He didn't look half as scary as he did when he slaughtered her boss and peers. She shuddered at the thought, remembering how his hood was up, and how he had a long three-bladed scythe with him which had actually giving him the impression of a soul reaper, as per his title. She remembered how he had effortlessly beheaded her guild's master with the weird three-bladed scythe, and then took out the second in command. She knew that she stood no chance from there on. Her foolish guild mates had attacked in anger, but she was wiser than that. She turned tail and ran, as fast as she could. The one fact that scared her most was that the runes were gradually supposed to siphon off his power until he died, so he was at less than 10% of his power. It was the reason her master, or rather late master, had been so confident, thinking that he would be weak if he had less than 10% of his full strength. How wrong he was. At less than 10% he had slaughtered her entire dark guild, which had at least 3 S-rank mages. She idly wondered just what they had unleashed unto the world. Rearing her thoughts back to the current situation, she became extremely self-conscious once she noticed that he had been staring at her for quite some time. She soon realized why. Apparently, after tumbling down the hill and splashing in the water, her clothes had been torn in numerous parts, and was now soaking wet, clinging to her skin. She let out an eep, and quickly covered her form. Men. How predictable. Fascinating. I didn't think I missed anyone back there. His voice was deep, however it still carried an edge to it, and however it sounded both demonic and angelic at the same time eluded her. No matter, though I thank you for freeing me. I cannot let the world know of my freedom yet, and as such all with the knowledge of my existence must be eliminated. With that final statement, she felt as though the world's gravity had landed on her shoulders with the force of a sledgehammer. Her heartbeat picked up and her breathing became hard and labored as the terrifying pressure shook her to the core. It was so dreadful and horrifying. She started seeing visions of her own death, dying in some of the sickest and most brutal ways possible, crushing, internal and external explosion, torn in half vertically and horizontally, tortured, abused, and so much more. Simultaneously, every single inch of happiness, joy or rationality had been forcefully sucked away from her mind. She could barely even contemplate slitting her own throat just to get away from him, to get away from the monster producing such an aura. With a large shriek, her back arched as she fell over, eyes rolled into the back of her head and frothing at the mouth. Her mind shattered, broken and confused from seeing visions of her own death, thereby actually causing her body's organs to act as if she had truly died. The red-headed blonde moved slowly over to the girl's body and sighed, however he quickly checked to see that she was merely unconscious and not dead. Interesting, and that wasn't even up to 1/4 of my total killing intent. Shaking his head at the thought, he realized that the deed was done. He had used his own special demonic chakra-laced killing intent to shatter a part of her mind and totally erase any memory of the past month. Painfully brutal, yes. Effective, most certainly, and efficiency was what he needed at the moment anyways. Turning his head towards the path leading out of the forest, he grinned viciously as he recalled the memories he had absorbed from some of the pathetic men that actually had the gall to fight him. Fury, let's see how ch has changed in the last 100 years, cause things are never be the same again. With that, he faded out of existence, as though he was never there in the first place. A young boy dashed through the forests and cliffs as fast as his 2 legs could carry him, the dim darkness of the early morning doing nothing to inhibit his eyesight or movement. He sprinted over obstacles in his way and moved as though he'd lived in a forest all his life. Why, his sandals wear on their last threads, his pants tearing at the seams with multiple patches already visible on the worn material, not to mention he had outgrown it a while ago. Why, his breathing became labored as he continued his journey up the hill, never stopping to rest or retire. His heart pumped several times a minute as the adrenaline propelled him forward. How could he? He had began panting now as he grit his teeth in frustration, his notable sharp incisor-like fangs grinding on top each other. He promised. His scarf swayed behind him in the rushing wind, its material resembling the scales of some form of reptilian creature. How could he? The trees parted to reveal his shining pink hair that caught the rays of the moon and glowed in the thickets of the forest. Why would he? He had finally reached his destination, the very top of the mountain, overlooking a vast forest, with an active volcano onto the side. As he darted out of the trees, several birds took to the air from the noise that followed, agitated from their rude awakening. Panting and gasping all the way, he sucked up a huge gulp of air before yelling at the top of his lungs. "Igneal!" he roared out, his voice echoing round the clearing, leaving him nothing but the reverberation of his own call as an answer. "Igneal, where are you?" he yelled loudly this time, sending previously sleeping birds flying away from their nests and giving the smaller prey of the forest a reason to flee in terror. Once again his voice ricocheted around the empty darkness of the forest, mocking him, taunting him, confirming his greatest, most lauded of fears. Igneal was gone, and he wasn't coming back. The pink-haired boy swayed on his feet and dropped to his knees. He grit his teeth even harder than ever before, causing him to taste the coppery feel of blood. He smashed his fist into the hard granite of the floor, channeling his emotions into his own pool of Eterno without realizing it. He felt it all, burning anger and rage, deep resentment, a bubbling fear and anxiety, a deep sense of regret, but above all emotions, there was one which overshadowed all others. He felt it most, the loneliness, for he was now alone, forgotten, and abandoned. Gritting his teeth even harder, he threw his head to the heavens and roared out one last time. "Igneal!" A magic circle formed in front of his mouth without him even realizing it, and from it, a massive burst of fire erupted in a geyser-like manner. The flames here sweltering hot as they sucked up the air and moisture around it, growing higher and higher into the clouds, the sheer amount of magical energy releasing it several feet high. In the darkness of the night it stood out in its glory, bathing the sky with an ethereal orange-red glow, visible to the eye of passers-by miles away, as though volcano had just erupted a blast of fire into the heavens. If one was not looking closely, one would think that the darkness had melted into sunset in an instantaneous alteration of time. He finished his roar, and slumped forward to the ground, exhausted. from the sheer amount of magical energy he had released. The orange faded from the night sky, and the stars which had previously seemed to hide from the inferno had resumed their eternal twinkling in the heavens. The forest area smelled of smoke, the ground had been superheated to the point of almost being molten, and even the nearby dunes of sand had partially transitioned to glass. As the roar of the dragon had ended, he was greeted with an eerie tormenting silence. Bats dared not screech, owls dared not hoot, and even crickets had momentarily forgotten how to chirp and became dumb. The mute stillness of the environment dug at his heart and tore at his soul. He had been hoping that the dragon would see the flames, would realize that his son needed him, would suddenly pop up and comment on how proud he was that his student had finally mastered the Karyu no Hauko, the roar of the fire dragon. It was all to no avail. He clenched his scarf closely and tightly as possible, his shaking fingers digging into his skin as he held on to the scarf as though it was his lifeline. It was the only memento he had of his friend, his teacher, and his father. Without even realizing it, several teardrops had rolled down from his eyes, landing on and wetting his dragon-scale pink scarf. Igneal, you promised. With that last lingering thought, the boy known as Natsu Dragneel, the doctor, Agon's layer of fire, quietly sobbed himself to sleep. Damn! With a slight distortion in the air, and a shimmer of heat, Uzumaki Naruto reappeared at a fork in the road, while grumbling slightly to himself. Annoying. Even after 2 years I still haven't balanced my power enough to properly work my space-time techniques. Rubbing his hand through his hair as was a habit of his, he moved onwards. Along the narrow path that led towards a forest. Most people would think he'd been wasting his time all this while, which was admittedly true. However, as an immortal he had forgotten the difference between a year and a week. Regardless, he had also been using that time wisely and for an entirely different purpose. The seal which had trapped him and been slowly siphoning off his magical energy. Designed to weaken him and eventually kill him. However, his magical energy was mixed and mumbled up with his chakra, which was why it took an extremely long time for the runes to separate it and absorb the magical energy alone. As the runes could not detect the chakra. For that reason, he survived. For that same reason, he was weakened. Merging his Eterno and chakra made him stronger and contained much more benefits. But since a huge amount of his Eterno had been drained from the runes, it destabilized the balance and he needed time to get the right amount back, otherwise he would be at a severe disadvantage. It was like physical and mental energy. Together they created chakra in equal amounts. With one insufficient, chakra control was impeded and unfocused. Nothing I see and do about that for now. At least there have been no sightings of Zerf or Acnologia for a while, and the only ones else strong enough to pose a threat to me would be the 10 wizard saints. Wandering in his thoughts, the immortal mage idly walked through the forest, the creatures and animals inhabiting the area giving him a wide berth. None of them were stupid enough to try and challenge a predator far out of their league. The last readings should be somewhere nearby. He furrowed his eyebrows slightly and hopped onto the nearest tree, before continuing his journey the standard shinobi way, tree travel. Closing his eyes, the ex-shinobi sensed around for what he was looking for precisely, an abnormality in space. There, he dashed forward with speeds only a ninja of his caliber could attain. And grew slightly giddy with excitement. It was close. Damn. And close it was. Several miles away from the immortal, the skies crackled with thunder, dark clouds gathered toget. Her and lightning flashed for the tiniest of seconds, before vanishing into nothingness. The wind picked up, and slowly howled in an ominous synchronized tone. Trees bowed and swayed on their spots, tethering on the edge of cracking. Swaying leaves danced to the tune of the storm, and the clouds circled together, the earth-shaking sound of thunder sending animals scurrying to find safety. The clouds could hold back no more, and several thousand gallons of water fell in the form of distinct innumerable raindrops, blanketing the ground with its steady drumming rhythm. The hammer of the Gods illuminated the heavens in an all-consuming flash of white, striking against another bolt as a hammer would an anvil. The coinciding clash created a large spiraling magic circle in the sky, which slowly morphed and changed into a giant glowing portal. There, I have to stop this. I won't let you continue your notorious schemes, old man. Standing on a hill overlooking the portal, a young boy, dressed in what seemed to be shinobi-like clothing which had bandaged hands and legs, wearing a mask, metal forehead protector, and sandals, removed 6 large curved wooden staves from his back and thrust them into the ground around him like a circle. His wet blue hair shone from the portal's light, and revealed an intricate tattoo around his eye. The boy began chanting several words in a quick hushed tone, and watched as a magical circle appeared beneath each of his staves. The circles converged onto the main one and made it begin to glow brightly and silently hum with power. I have to do this now, before it sucks all the Eterano in the area, he thought furiously, and then let out a grunt of effort as a glowing beam shot out from his main curved stave and went soaring through the portal straight from the middle. The portal seemed to expand for several seconds, before suddenly cracking like glass, and lightning began shooting out of it. The malfunctioning portal slowly began shrinking in size as the blue-haired boy gave a slight sigh of relief and effort. However, before he could relax, the portal suddenly shook, and froze in place. What the? And the sight that happened next was one of the most terrifying and amazing things he'd ever seen. Damn, Naruto growled lowly as he realized that someone was already closing the portal before he could get there, and realized that he would not be able to get what he needed in time. If I can't get there, how about I do the reverse? He grinned as he was suddenly hit by a spark of inspiration. Buckling his knees on the tree which he'd landed on, he bit his finger and unsealed a weapon from his person, before pumping as much chakra as he could to perform what could only be described as the fastest body flicker in shinobi history. Damn! The blue-haired mage watched in astonishment, as a mysterious figure suddenly appeared in the night sky, clothed in black combat-looking pants, a sleeveless white kimono top with a black trim, black sandals, and his dark cape swaying in the wind. He wielded a massive object that was wrapped in bandages and could only be described as a massive, scaly club. Lightning lashed through the air and moved towards the figure, its all-consuming wrath having found a new target. The mysterious caped man turned towards the bolt with a cold, dispassionate look, and said Ingle word that Jellal would never forget. Reikiri. The words had neither been yelled nor whispered, yet it wielded so much force behind it that left the young citizen of Edalis totally floored. The screeching and sound of what could only be described as the angry chirping of 1,000 birds roared through the sky, its deafening sound being matched by the roar of thunder that followed the hammer of the gods. In what could only have been described as a battle between man and nature, the incoming bolt of lightning crashed into the man's left hand, and then abruptly split into two. Jellal watched with a detached expression as both split sides of lightning crashed into the ground to his sides, gouging out new trenches on the hill like an artist chiseling a sculpture. The young Edalis mage continued to stare awestruck as the man continued, never breaking his stride, and swung the massive spiked club through the dissolving portal, and cut through it like a hot knife through butter. The portal seemed to have evaporated in a loud bang, as the displaced air returned into place, and the red-headed warrior landed into a crouched position directly in front of the awestruck boy. The man gave a fanged, infuriating closed-eye smile as he effortlessly swung the spiked club over his left shoulder. Enjoyed the show, I take it? He asked with a smooth, manly and somehow terrifyingly frightening accent. For the first time in a long while, Jellal stumbled backwards and landed on his butt, both jaws and eyes wide open in shock. Damn! Naruto felt like laughing at totally awestruck face of the young boy in front of him, but instead settled for a terrifying grin. Well, what do we have here? He mused. For a censor of his caliber, it was easy for him to know that the boy in front of him did not possess any form of Eterno in his body, and as such, he had quickly deduced that the boy was not of this world, being an immortal being that had been in existence for a long time. Naruto knew that there existed a parallel realm that was similar to this one. A realm called Edalis, in which its inhabitants could not use magic. He walked forward and grabbed the boy by his neck, glaring into his eyes with such malice that would have frozen men to stone. Tell me, Edalis boy, who do you think you are? Said boy's eyes widened in a combo of shock and once he realized that the man in front of him, and somehow realized he was not from Earthland. My name is Jellal, he started, but was immediately cut off. On second thought, I couldn't care less about who you are. What I care about is what you're doing. The redhead released an intense amount of killing intent that caused the boy to stop breathing for several seconds. Jellal gasped as he tried to use his puny hands to free himself from the redhead's grip, but to no avail. His vision fogged and consciousness blurry as the heavy load on his shoulders threatened to crush him to paste. As soon as it seemed he was going to die, the weight abruptly lifted. "Now that I have gathered your attention," Naruto spoke with a menacing tone that sent shivers down the boy's spine. "I end the freezing cold of the subsiding rain. I needed that portal to Edelus for a very important project, but since you closed it, I'll have to wait for another one to open up, and find it wherever it may be." Lifting the boy higher to the point that his feet were dangling in the air lamely, "You are extremely lucky that I am in quite a good mood today, so I'll give you a warning." Lightning flashed at that moment, giving Jellal a good look of the man that had suddenly had him absolutely powerless, and in that moment he felt true, unbidden fear. Bringing him back to eye level, Jellal shook with trepidation as his brow was moist with sweat. "You have a 5-minute head start. Vacate this forest, and disappear from my sight, if you are not out of the forest before the 5 minutes are over. I shall kill you." Thunder rumbled and lightning reflected the insanity in the man's eyes, and he blatantly declared he would murder someone as though it were a simple fact that even a child could comprehend. "And if I ever see you again, run as quickly as you can, and pray you are either extremely fast or extremely lucky, otherwise you will meet an unsightly death." His eyes were empty and devoid of all emotion. And he ended his threat with a condescending tone of finality. "Your time starts now." He effortlessly flung the boy away from him, and watched as the boy did not hesitate for a second before grabbing his staves and fleeing. "What a waste." Sighing, the disguised immortal stared back at the spot where the portal had been, and then to the sword Samahata that was grumbling in his hand. His plans for the week were ruined for now, it seemed, and he had no intention of hunting down a weak child just for the fun of it. "Perhaps I should storm through the gates of hell for some entertainment, Samahata." He asked the sentient sword and watched as it rumbled slightly before he rolled his eyes. "Of course you would like that, you glutton. All you care about these days is mostly about sucking the energy and souls out of people." The sword gave something which sounded like an annoyed or redundant grunt. "Besides," he started slowly staring off he cliff as the rain came to a gradual halt and the clouds slowly parted. "It's much too early for him to become aware of my return." Turning around, he began a slow walk through the forest. "Damn, I need some allies if I'm retorting to conversing with a sword for some company." The giant bandaged scaly club retorted. "It makes no difference, even if you are sentient. Now go to sleep." Sealing the weapon away, the Uzumaki vanished in a swirl of leaves, while wondering of what had become of his former allies. Damn. Elsewhere, a giant beast seemingly slumbered peacefully in a cave, its ears twitching ever so often. Paws the size of large houses and a giant maze of fur could be found on its body. Suddenly, its eyes snapped open, the slitted fox-like eyes, glowing red with demonic energy, glared out into the darkness. Massive body-white teeth became visible as a large fox-like grin spread across the beast's face with undisguised glee. "It's been a long time, Uzumaki Naruto." With the following cackling of demonic laughter, the demon stood and shook its head. "The future as they know it is gone, and the new era will soon begin." With that, the giant fox reared back its head, and it roared, a sound so indescribably inhuman, impiously terrifying, nightmare-inducing bellow that echoed throughout the continent on that day. The king of demons had awakened, and his power had been unleashed. And the results of such power had been displayed. The previously striking mountainous landscape had been reduced to nothing but ash. Damn. Halfway through his Shunshin technique, Naruto paused on a high tree branch. For a moment there, I could have sworn I heard. His thoughts were put to an abrupt halt when he heard the unmistakable sound of something growling. Glancing down, he caught the familiar sight of blue hair which was in the forest floor. "That brat is still here," he wondered. "I thought I'd have scared him halfway to Edelus by now." Swinging from the high branches with amazing dexterity, he stood on one of the middle-tier trees, intending to sneak up on his unsuspecting prey and once more scaring the devil out of him. However, he realized that he had received the wrong target. "Stay back. Don't come any closer," an unmistakable feminine voice called out, the decibels high-pitched from the fear she was feeling. All around her, roan and gray-furred wolves surrounded her and slowly circled the defenseless female. The immortal shinobi quickly took in the appearance of the girl. She was extremely young even by mortal standards. Had long flowing blue hair that covered her back, as dressed in a green gown which had scale-like patterns on it and had on plain white slippers. Well, interesting, I never thought I would find one of those famed mages here, he thought aloud as his enhanced nose effortlessly took in the smell of the young girl. It was a smell he knew too well. The smell of crisp morning air, and dew in the morning, mixed in with the unmistakable aura of some of the world's scariest and most powerful creatures. It was the smell of a dragon. The disguised blonde quickly came to the conclusion that the girl was indeed a dragon slayer. And it seemed that she was either the heir or wind dragon slayer as he could perceive. Well, this looks interesting. Show me what you're made of. Let me see. The might of the power that can slay even dragons, he chuckled as he completely erased any signs of his presence and hid silently in the overgrowth with a seal-less, wordless henge thrown in with a basic chameleon technique. Damn, Wendy was in no way, shape or form, having a good day. First, it started off when her lovable mother Grandine had disappeared, leaving her scared and alone. She'd managed to wander off in the forest to search for her, that in of itself had taken a huge amount of courage to do. Then, she had gotten lucky enough to meet a young boy named Jellal who had promised to guide her out of the forest. However, he left claiming he had something important he needed to take care of and he hadn't seen him since. Finally, she'd been cornered by a group of wolves who had smelt her presence. And she had little to no doubt that unless she did something, she was going to become their dinner. Help, Jellal Nichin, she yelled as much as she could, but it seemed that no one was going to rescue her. Out of options, she curled herself in a fetal position as tears began flooding down her eyes. She couldn't believe it. She was so scared. She was alone, hungry, tired fr. All the walking she'd had to do and barely had any strength left to fight. That is, if she could even fight. She wished that she was back at home, feeling the warmth of scales provided by her mother Grandine. She wished she could sit under the large oak tree at the cliff, and eat the fish or occasional meat which her lovely mother had been able to catch. Or even back to her training, as the Sky Dragon would teach her the basic healing abilities she possessed as the Sky Dragon Slayer, and how she could support other combatants in battle with her support magic. She wished she was able to have at least learned the Sky Dragon's roar, then maybe she'd have been able to fight back against these wolves. Small and young as she was, she knew it was too late to change anything. The wall, vase were growling and the seeming leader of the pack had charged forward, its fangs and claws ready to tear through skin and to sink its teeth through flesh. I'm sorry Grandine, she sobbed quietly as she braced herself for death. Pathetic, her eyes snapped open as she heard the voice. It was filled with disgust and anger. She couldn't figure out where it was coming from. You call yourself a dragon slayer. And this is all that you are worth. She snapped her head left and right trying to find the location of the daunting voice which seemed to mock her and stab her at her very soil. Is this the power of a dragon slayer? To run, hide and then die crying? Is this your worth? Is this all what your dragon has taught you? How to cry like a weak child? No, she yelled in her mind, anger slowly replacing her fear. Rage and annoyance eliminating the feeling of despair. Then you have two options, Dragon Slayer. Die crying on your knees as you are reduced to a meal by beasts, or rise and show the world what it means to be a slayer of dragons. She froze. She knew it was pointless. She knew she had no chance. She barely knew any combat magic, and her physical strength was so pathetic. She couldn't even crack a nut if she wanted to. Yet, the voice, as mocking as it may have been, had stroked a hidden flame deep within her, the idea of being killed and eaten by wolves and she had lived her whole life with a dragon. The voice had been right. Pathetic. She grit her teeth in frustration. She wouldn't let life's irony win. She had no other options. She either died crying, or died fighting to her last breath. Arg! Just as one of the wolf's claws slashed against her hand, the brittle thread of indecision holding her back snapped. The entire forest was and reverberating as an enormous pulse of magical energy was released. The hungry predators were momentarily blinded by the sudden light, and the girl took her chance. Arms. Vernier. She yelled as she concentrated every last drop of magic in her body to amplify herself. Raw. With a mighty battle cry, she charged forward, becoming nothing more than a streak as she slammed her miniature fists into the nozzle of the wolf that had tried to eat her. The beast let out a shriek of pain as it was sent flying back, crashing into 2 more of its brethren. She did not let up. Continuing the assault, she charged forward, feet kicking up a dust cloud as they disconnected from the earth. Rearing back her fist, she connected a mighty straight jab towards another wolf, and the name of the technique struck her. Sky Dragon's Iron Fist. She roared as the creature flew back through the foliage and soared out of sight. The other wolves suddenly seemed to smarten up, as they surrounded her and charged all at once. While howling wildly into the air, Wendy took a deep breath, gulping all the surrounding oxygen around her, and then stared at the creatures. Her memory suddenly flashed back to several weeks ago. Ka-san, Wendy cried out. I still haven't been able to make it work. I try over and over again, but all I keep getting is just a little gust. How do you do it? A large white dragon moved out of an open cave and bore down closer to the girl. The dragon let out a melodious giggle that a beast of such size did not have any right possessing, before whispering softly to the girl's ear. The secret, Wendy, is not the amount of power you put into it, but the will that channels that power. The little girl tilted her head cutely in confusion. The will? She asked. Yes, Wendy. When you have a strong enough willpower, no task is unachievable. Most people direct their willpower into something stronger, the will to protect, and it gives them immense strength to overcome any challenge. The dragon stared and giggled as it seemed that the girl was getting more lost than anything else. The will to protect. What's that? That, dear Wendy, is the power you gain when you channel your will. Be it to protect something you hold dear, to prove something you believe in, or the desire and strength to persevere. Depending on how much willpower you possess, and how you channel it, you can accomplish anything. The little girl looked dizzy. Ka-chan, I don't think I get it. The dragon merely smiled sagely. Don't worry, dear, one day, you will. Her eyes snapped open in realization. I understand now, Grandine. She thought sadly before steeling her expression, to the best a 5-year-old could manage. Tenryu no Hoko. She released her breath, and along with it, she demonstrated to the world the will of a dragonslayer. A massive trench formed from within the earth as a powerful gust of wind had sent it flying apart. The wolf's in its path where sent crashing into a tree. Said tree was then uprooted from the earth as the force of a hurricane slammed into it and sent it tumbling away. Grass and leaves flew windingly in the wind. Dust was kicked up to unbelievable levels, before vanishing as the force of a hurricane summoned by the dragonslayer tore through anything and everything in its path. Trees that could not be end or bow to the wind was broken and destroyed by it, and even those that did bow were no match. The powerful roar sent out a devastating shockwave of magical energy that slammed and cut through everything in its way. Through it all, a lone figure stood high on a tree branch with chakra keeping his soles planted to the branch lest he be thrown away, and grinned in satisfaction. The powerful storm slowly subsided. Before gradually fading away, the entire portion of the forest looked like it had been hit continuously by hurricanes, and no animal with a sane mind had dared to go near the vicinity of the chaotic destruction which had just taken place. Did it. Grandine, the cause of the sudden natural disaster, stumbled on her feet, completely weakened, and shaking like a leaf. She looked as though she would keel over at the slightest of provocations. Alas, a 5-year-old body was neither ready nor capable of holding such amount of power. She gasped as she coughed up blood, tasting and smelling the familiar coppery liquid in her mouth. Glancing at the destruction that lay before her, she had only one thought left. Grandine. Why? She froze as her eyes rolled into the back of her head and she promptly fell backwards in a weak faint. Wendy groaned slightly as she rubbed her aching head. Her eyes were still blurry and her mind was still waking up from its dream-like state. The first thing she took notice of was that it was currently nighttime and the stars and moon were the only things illuminating the sky. She also felt warmth, and immediately her enhanced dragonslayer nose swept into action and she could distinctly smell the aroma of something cooking or roasting under a warm fire. Clearing the fog from her eyes and battling with her aching body, she managed to sit upright with some effort, only to be greeted with the sight of a large piece of meat being roasted under an open fire. Her pupils quickly adjusted to the bright light from the flames, and she enjoyed the wonderful smell of the food, not to mention the warmth was overly appreciated. However, with her head clearing up, she immediately took into notice of her appearance. I look like a mummy. She thought with slight panic, as she was draped in bandages, despite the fact that she couldn't see any indication of bleeding or any forms of wounds. She then realized that the apparent reason she was draped in bandages was because she had absolutely no other clothes on, save for the white material which covered her modesty. What's going on? I thou. GHT. She scrambled to remember what exactly had happened before arriving in such a situation, but kept drawing slight blanks. Oh. You're finally awake. She slowly turned her head to the left where she'd heard the voice from. Part of her felt it was eerily familiar, but she just couldn't place where she'd heard it before. Out of some dark thickets, a tall, blond man stepped out. He was wearing some robes of which Wendy had never seen before. His blue eyes had an enchanting quality to them, and his black sandals made almost no noise as he walked. She didn't know why, but she felt slightly scared. Eat up. You'll need your strength, and it tastes better when hot anyways. He stated briefly, handing her a bowl of what looked to be some sort of stew made with meat, and garnished with fruits, herbs and vegetables. Wendy felt her mouth watering at the sight. She'd never seen a meal look so good before. At first she was tempted not to collect a meal, but the grumbling in her stomach eventually won over. Collecting the bowl, she managed to find her voice to utter a weak arigato. She'd said it so fast and so slowly that she assumed he wouldn't hear her, but it seemed he did and merely shrugged it off. With slight trepidation, she took a bite into the food, itadakimasu, and then promptly began chewing it down in a manner one would never expect from a 5-year-old girl. The blonde man merely looked amused, before digging into his own bowl of noodles with a pair of chopsticks that seemingly popped out of nowhere. Ah! She let out a satisfied sigh as she finished the bowl in record time. Seconds? He asked, offering her another bowl. As tempted as she was, she didn't want to take advantage of the stranger's generosity and also appear like a glutton. Don't worry about it, there's more where that came from. Help yourself to as much as you want. In the end, the lack of food from morning till night motivated her to accept. After a while of sitting and eating in silence, Wendy finished her 5th and final bowl, before letting out a quiet burp of satisfaction. Thank you so much. Ka-chan never made anything this good before. She nodded happily, as it was true. The Sky Dragon wasn't exactly a master chef. No problem, I'll be willing to teach you, he stated with a coy smile. Really, she was ecstatic. She would love to learn how to cook. Anyo, I forgot to ask, what was in that soup? She scratched her head sheepishly. She actually just ate it out of hunger, and it had tasted like nothing she'd ever had before. Wolf meat, he stated bluntly, as though it was the most normal thing in the world. Wolf meat. Wendy pondered on the words for 3 whole seconds, before she was struck by realization. I just ate a wolf. She was confused, and felt slightly ill. Most of the time she ate the meat Grandine would bring, mostly fish though, but the thought of eating a predator like a wolf. And how did he make it taste so good? Yes, it should help boost your confidence the next time you get surrounded by wolves. She tilted her head slightly in confusion. What did he mean by the next? Wendy's eyes snapped open involuntarily, as she was assaulted by memories of what had transpired earlier that morning. The wolves, the fear, and the willpower she'd needed to overcome it. Most importantly, however, she remembered her own death. Damn. Wendy felt an overwhelming amount of dread fill her up. She could remember it clearly, how she had died, how she was left floating in an empty abyss of nothingness for what felt to be an eternity, how she'd yelled and cried, begged and pleaded for someone to rescue her, all to no avail. She shivered involuntarily. She was sure that it was the end of her short 5-year-old life. She'd seen every single moment of her life in a series of flashes. She remembered the coldness that had consumed her, so cold it burned at her very essence. The memory of her vision fading, her hearing wearing away, her breathing stressed and labored. It was the single most terrifying experience she had ever felt in her life. It thought, she stammered slowly, as though there was a lump in her throat. You thought you died. The blonde man finished for her. Her head snapped up so quickly it seemed as though it would break. She then stared at him. Yes, how did you know that? Dots started forming in her mind. He had mentioned giving her wolf meat to make sure she would lose her fear of wolves, but how would he have known that unless he was actually there? Recognition lit up in her once she recalled that the voice had felt familiar. Pathetic. It was the same voice. The same one which had taunted her, mocked her status as a dragonslayer and spurned her into action. How am I still here, and who are you? She asked slightly harsher than she'd intended. She was scared, confused, and who knew if the stranger had tried to poison her. Paranoia began rising up, and she moved backwards as the man got up. I'm afraid you'll have to ask him. My time here is up anyways. She started, only to turn around and meet T. He exact same person she was talking to behind her. She jumped back in a startled fright, turning around to see the man's previous position, and finding nothing or no one there but the slight remains of what looked like white smoke that was blown away with the wind. Facing the man once more, she could hear him mumble something under his breath that sounded like, "Smartass clones. Well, now that you are awake, Dragonslayer, you'd better sit down, for this is something you'd definitely want to hear." Damn. As Naruto stared into the eyes of the little girl, he couldn't help but remember His familiarity to the creature he'd just spoke with, and the events that had occurred earlier that day. Simply wonderful, to think that she was able to use the Sky Dragon's roar successfully, and at such a young age. The immortal shinobi jumped down from his hiding spot amongst the trees, and slowly walked up to the girl. Upon analyzing her body though, he frowned slightly. I see, she momentarily activated her dragon force mode to give her the boost she needed for a roar of such power. He mumbled quietly to himself as he picked up the girl in his arms as though she was weightless. Unfortunately her body is not ready or used to wielding such a huge amount of magical energy, then pulsing it all out in one blast. At this rate, she'll explode from the sheer amount of magical pressure she contained. As though reading his thoughts, the girl's body began to heat up and glow a pure white sheen, the white light blinding everything within its radius, and it appeared as though it was a bomb just waiting to go off. Kuso. He swore silently before immediately weighing his options. There were numerous ways he could save her, but all of them would end up crippling her magic one way or another. Or she'd lose her magical ability altogether. Unless, a sudden thought had sprung into his mind, he could do it, but would it work? Placing the glowing girl on the ground, he placed his hand on her stomach Shikoku Fuin. Quickly using his finger he engraved several seals on the girl's stomach in rapid progression, before completing the final task of the technique. Placing his hand on the girl's head he muttered out Kyuken no Jutsu. He then abruptly proceeded to drag her soul out of her body, using the soul absorption abilities granted by his eyes. It was not a second too soon, as the girl's body violently exploded in a shower of light and magical energy. With his free hand, he swiftly moved it out and performed another special technique Fujutsu Kyuin. He roared out, using the chakra absorption technique which he'd modified to be able to absorb Eterna and magical energy. The explosion shrunk in size, and finally reduced to nothingness as he let out a breath of air he didn't know he was holding. However, along with it, the girl's body was gone. And now for the final step, putting his free hand through a series of one-handed hand seals. He performed the technique he'd learned from the last of the Senju, combined with the ones he'd studied over the years. Yin Seal. Release. Creation Rebirth. Activating the first jutsu, he quickly moved on to the second. Cell Activity Technique. Yin Healing Wound Destruction. He grinds his teeth together before activating the final procedure. Nikutai Kase no Jutsu. Body Revival Technique. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then slowly, what looked like a lump of flesh appeared in midair. The lump grew spontaneously, forming legs, arms, hands, fingers, a head, and then eyes, nose, ears, and a mouth. Finally, it grew long blue hair that swayed slightly, before abruptly dropping to the ground. It worked. The shinobi grinned in satisfaction, before moving the girl's soul and memories which he'd been holding back into her body. Afterwards, he did the same with the large amount of Eterno he'd absorbed, and allowed it to fill up the girl's reserves, which were much more larger and refined than they once were. Naruto glanced at the sleeping girl, and cursed slightly once he realized he had no clothes for her to wear or use, since her previous ones had been destroyed. Gay. I can't leave her naked, otherwise she'll wake up and think I did something wrong to her. Shrugging, he decided to use bandages to cover her decency until he could find something better. Regardless of which, He could not help but smirk at the satisfaction of his accomplishment. He had done what no one else could possibly lay claim of ever doing. He'd successfully given a Dragon Slayer the ability to use chakra. Stranger-san, Stranger-san. The soft high-pitched voice of a little girl drew him from his memories. Yes, Dragon Slayer, he asked in a slightly annoyed tone. Couldn't he inflate his own ego a little more? My name is Wendy. She let out a HMPH in annoyance, and you were just staring at me for hours now. It's been 4.5 minutes. He deadpanned slightly. Maybe it was because he'd lost all sense of time after becoming immortal. Well, it felt like hours. She whined. You need to learn to be more patient, he stated matter-of-factly. And you need to stop staring at little girls. She stuck her tongue out at him childishly. The shinobi merely sighed as his right eye twitched in annoyance. If only Kurama or hell even Zirf could see him now. Bantering with a 5-year-old, the dark mage would kill his immortal self from laughter, and then revive himself, and then kill himself from laughter again. He didn't even want to think about what Kurama would do. Clearing his throat slightly, he began. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. He paused, waiting to see the reaction on her face. To relish in the shock, surprise, and then the fear, it would certainly keep her quiet for a while. Although, things never work out the way you plan them. Okay, Naruto-san, I'm Wendy Marvell, she stated in a cheerful tone, which caused Naruto to sweat drop slightly. You've never heard of me? He wondered how it was possible. Well, am I supposed to? She asked in a slightly hesitant and uncertain tone that made Naruto face palm. What in the world have you been teaching her then, you overgrown lizard? Has the years passed by so much that I've been reduced to a mere legend? You know, Naruto Uzumaki, the Shinigami no Kage, the Mage of Apocalypse. He asked in a, tone of voice, as though it was common knowledge. Anyo, you mean Zirf? She tilted her head to the side. No, not. You know what, never mind. He groaned slightly. Zirf, that little brat. I'd taken on a full biju before he was even in his diapers, and now people remember him over me. What is the world coming to? He slowly contemplated his options. Well, this might work to my advantage. If people don't remember who I am, it certainly helps remain unseen and unnoticed, and by the time they realize, it would be too late. Anyo, Naruto-san, you're spacing out again. Right. He cleared his throat slightly. He really needed to stop spacing out. I'm sure you want to know how you're still alive, and why you're covered in bandages. His sharp eyes took in the fact that once he'd mentioned the still alive part, she'd shivered and clenched her fists. Well, let's see. After your little dragon's roar, you'd charged up not only all your magical energy, but subconsciously took out energy from the atmosphere as well. She looked at him. He'd seemed to have entered what resembled a lecture mode. The fact is that you are the Sky Dragon Slayer, and as such you eat air. However, the air of this world is charged with Eterno, and as such, you took in more Eterno than your entire body could contain. He began, waving his finger as he closed his eyes and spoke to his heart's content. Naruto-san, she tried to interrupt, but to no avail. The result was a powerful attack that was at least 10 times stronger than a normal attack would have been. However, charging your body with so much magical power and then proceeding to depower it so quickly had several changes to your physiology. It affected your body internally. Anyo, Naruto-san, a 5-year-old body cannot withstand so much magical pressure, and as such the result was it trying to force its way out of your body through whatsoever means necessary. Not to mention that temporarily activating Dragon Force for a boost in power had its own side effects. Dragon what? So the end result was your body being destroyed by the excess magical energy. Luckily I was there to fix the problem by giving you a new body with advanced magical potential and capabilities. Also, your clothes were destroyed in the process, which is why you are in bandages. Is that all understood? He finished as he glanced at the girl who stared at him in awe. She was more surprised as to how he'd said all that in one breath rather than being amazed at the explanation. Not that he could tell the difference. So, do you understand? He asked once more. You said the world is charged with what? She scratched her head as she looked why from the amount of information he'd just thrown her way. Naruto blinked, and then blinked once more. before proceeding to face-palming himself as he sighed in exasperation. I can't believe forgot I was explaining to a 5-year-old, of course she wouldn't understand. Getting up from his seated position on a rock, he wiped off any imaginary dust around or on his body before putting his hands in his pockets and walking off. Ah, Naruto-san, where are you going? She caught up to him and held him by his hand. I'm leaving. I have more important things to do than sit here and babysit a little brat. He drew his hand back and proceeded to continue moving. He still needed to search for another portal to Edelus, find out where all of his demons were, and get his strength. GTH back up to Pat should he run into Acnologia or Zirfa on his way. But you can't just leave me here, she yelled as she grabbed onto his leg. There's nothing stopping me from doing so. Now get off me. The blonde ninja proceeded to try and pry off the girl who had firmly hooked around his leg. Then take me with you. What? The blonde pried her off, before kneeling to her height and staring at her. She seemed to have lost her nerve for a second, before staring back at him. Take me with you, she repeated, more fiercely than the last time. I can't. Why not? The roads I'll be traveling through are harsh. The climate is unbearable for a child. The quests and activities I'll be undergoing would kill even some of the most talented of S-rank mages. I don't care. He raised an eyebrow. What? I said I don't care. I'll go anywhere you go. I'll follow you. She responded with slight childlike anger. Just please don't leave me alone, she ended softly, and slightly on the verge of tears as she tightened her fists. Naruto simply sighed. I've been doing that a lot lately. He lifted her chin up and stared at her. Wipe your tears, Dragonslayer, I hate seeing it. The girl sniffled and cleaned her eyes with her bandages. Why do you want to follow me? He asked seriously. For once his mocking, lecturing or deadpan tone was replaced with seriousness she hadn't seen from him before. Well, I don't know anyone or anywhere to go, or how to live on my own for a long while. I'm lost in. She paused, hesitating for a second. And the shinobi pressed on. And everyone I've ever met keeps leaving. Ka-chan, Jellal Nichan, and now you Naruto-san. I just don't want to be alone. She sniffled slightly, and catching Naruto completely off guard, she ran into him and proceeded to cry into his chest. Naruto froze for a whole 3 seconds, unsure of what to do, before he was assaulted by several memories. You don't understand, Gigi. A younger Naruto with whisker marks on his face yelled at the old man in the hat and robes. Tears streamed down his face as he poured his heart out. No one likes me here. They all say mean things about me. Calm down, Naruto. Let's talk about the problem. The old man tried to placate him, but was failing miserably. The problem is everyone, Gigi. They all ignore me and act like I'm not there. The only friend I ever made was told to stop seeing me because I'm a monster. There he is. That pathetic scum. Worthless brat. Demon. Run. The Mage of Apocalypse is here. Everyone take your children and run. A family huddled up into a corner. The father stood chokingly and sweating profusely stared at him. What do you want, Dark Mage? Kill me but leave my family out of it. He stuttered out. I'm not here to kill you. I just wanted to see your daughter. A smiling blonde Naruto said with a placating gesture. You've been meeting with that monster. And no, father. It must be a mistake. I've never seen him in my life. Why, you're denying me? He sounded hurt, broken even. She's an atrocity just like you then. Father, shut up. You're no daughter of mine. He growled. The brunette and thrust her at the blonde. You evil monsters need to leave right now. Get out. I hate you, Naruto. I wish we'd never met. The ringing echo and pain of the slap he'd received paled greatly in comparison to the feeling of having his heart torn apart by bulls. Suguha. Wait, Naruto. Help me. A beautiful brunette fell, diving off the end of a cliff. A younger Naruto dashed forward. Suguha. Naruto. Please, don't leave me. Naruto-san, please don't leave me here. The blonde's eyes widened as he rapidly began using a meditation technique to control his breathing and heart rate. What in the world was that? I haven't had memories about those events since. The blonde frowned. He'd deal with those memories later, but for now though. All right, stop your incessant crying, I'll let you follow me. He muttered lowly. Really? Thank you so much. She glomped him and proceeded to wipe her tears off his shirt. Not so fast, I'll let you follow me on 3 conditions. She paused and looked up to him. First, you have to undergo some intense amount of training to make sure you are up to the task of traveling with me, and defending yourself should the need arise. She nodded. Second, you are to never, ever, mention to anyone that you know me, have seen me, or even traveled with me. Just make sure you do not mention my name to anyone, got it? She nodded again, more enthusiastically than before. Third, whatever I teach you cannot be shown or taught to anyone without my permission, regardless, and some of the more complex ones are not to be used until absolutely necessary. Understood. Hi, Naruto-san, and you must refer to me as Naruto-sensei from now on. Hey, you said 3 conditions. She pouted. Do you want to follow me or not? He asked sternly. Fine, Naruto-nichan then. The blonde sighed as he ruffled her hair. He supposed it would do for now. Glancing back at the girl, he couldn't help but add me. That the annoying sky dragon was somewhat right. Well, it seems I have a guest here. Naruto spoke to the open air. He had just successfully finished wrapping Wendy with bandages, and sent a shish Ado clone to find something for the girl to eat once she woke up. An eerie ball of light flew around from behind the trees and launched at him with insane speed. Halfway through its lunge, it transformed into a glorious white dragon that bared its teeth, ready to tear through flesh and bone. Clang! Dragon fangs met sword in a brilliant display of sparks, as the immortal shinobi had simultaneously unsealed the decapitating head sword, which was a large zanbeitu that had once been in the possession of Momochi Zabuza, one of the 7 swordsmen of the Hidden Mist. Dark Mage, I do not know how you have been freed from your prison, but all I do know is I will stop you from putting any more harm to Wendy. The distinctive angry feminine voice called out, as the dragon stared into the man's calm blue eyes. The shadow clone which had been sent to find food returned, and abruptly moved into a defensive stance. Don't worry, stay here with the girl until she wakes up, I won't be gone long. He ordered the clone, and the chakra construct merely nodded. Then in a rush of wind, both dragon and man disappeared. Boom! Thereby causing the displaced air to rapidly shift back into position, and leaving behind a sonic boom that nearly popped the guardian clone. The shinobi and the dragon appeared on a cliff far off from their original position, and proceeded to engage in a silent stare down. Do you really want to do this? The shinobi asked with a calm tone as he idly swung the oversized sword as though it were made of papier-mâché. I will fight to my last breath if it means protecting Wendy. She replied with an angry growl. Then I assume you are in luck, for I have no intention of harming her. The air suddenly froze. Liar. There was no dramatic blur, no movement of wind, no afterimage. 1 second, Grandine was in her starting position, the next, she'd appeared beside him with her claws swung in action. The blonde rotated on his axis, blocking the giant claws with the flat side of his blade. Oh, what makes you think I'm lying? He asked with a calm glare at the beast that had the audacity to challenge his word. Why else would she be covered in bandages? She asked rhetorically. What? I couldn't exactly let her stay naked after her clothes were ruined. Her clothes were naked. Her eyes lit up with a dangerous fire as she swung at him in rage. You dare. You disgusting filth. She's only 5 years old. You couldn't find someone older to satisfy your sick, revolting urges. The dragon bellowed out in an unholy rage. Wait, what? He jumped back, narrowly avoiding the swing. I'll make you pay for what you've done. The dragon reared back her head and began sucking all the oxygen in the surrounding area. Listen here. I did not. Whatever he wanted to stay was paused, as the mighty dragon aimed, and then roared. An all-consuming blast of wind tore through the ground. Trees were lifted up and swung around like toothpicks. The ground itself was shredded by the blast of wind, rocks and granite turning to fine powder in seconds. The very nature of the wind seemed to roar and howl, a massive tornado the likes the world had never seen sprung up from thin air before, slamming into the blonde with the force of a shooting star. Clouds in the sky swirled and turned, their colors melting into an eerie dark gray. Lightning flashed, and the entire sky had turned thick sickly color. 2 more tornadoes seemed to have sprung up, joining the first and becoming larger by the minute. The rotating vortexes of winds picked up the blonde. and slammed him with debris of all sorts, from trees so rocks, to animals. With the storm drawing closer to its end, the pressure of the wind maximized an SLAMMED his body into the ground with enough force to create a massive, spiraling, cracked crater that dwarfed the entirety of some of the larger towns as Magnolia. The dragon loomed down on his broken form, which lied face first in the crater, and then proceeded to stomp on it with the speed of sound. Another sonic boom followed as the white dragon showed no mercy and slammed its claws into the man's back, enlarging the already formidable crater. Is this all you are worth, Dark Mage? I can't believe the stories were so vastly exaggerated. She, however, froze in shock when the figure underneath her exploded in a puff of smoke. Turning around, she spotted the blonde shinobi, completely unharmed in front of her. And he looked murderous. Shinra Tensai. Grandine could not explain the feeling, other than it feeling as though she was backhanded by a giant titan. The dragon flew into the air at immense speeds, not of her own free will, as she felt as though she'd received nay of Acknowledgia's roars straight to the face. Bansho. Tenon. She abruptly froze mid-flight, as she felt an inexplicable force pull her towards the earth at extreme speeds. She slammed into the ground, leaving a massive dragon-shaped indent as she suddenly realized she couldn't move her body. When she tried, she felt an unyielding force slam her down even harder, as though she was at the bottom of a dragon dogpile with over 50 overweight dragons on top. Don't bother, dragon. I have increased the gravity of your body by 20 times the gravity of the earth. You won't be getting up anytime soon. She stared through the dust clouds and watched as the man walked slowly towards her, his sword swung over his shoulder and his eyes glowing in purple with an eerie metallic tint. She growled, or at least tried to, when the man abruptly walked on her face as though she were a doormat before staring into her eyes. In that one moment, Grandine had never felt that much fear, and that much hatred for a single person. Arrogance, Sky Dragon, is what brings about the downfall of all creatures. He stated calmly, I have killed 1,000 of your kind before your par. Ents were mere hatchlings and you dared attack me. His voice took on a darker, demonic-sounding tone to it as his eyes blended to red with a rotating biohazard symbol engraved on it. Nonetheless, I will allow you to go this one instance, since it was from a mere misconception. He paused and stared back at her. Get this right, dragon. I may have committed 1,000 sins worth 1,000 lifetimes, but I do not molest children. Grandine saw the look in his eyes and realized that he was indeed dead serious about his statement. Calmly walking off the dragon's face, he dusted off all imaginary dirt off his body before continuing. I assure you that your daughter. He paused as if trying to comprehend the impossibility, is in good hands. I have no ill intentions for her, and I would most appreciate it if you do not question my judgment or decision. Then what do you want with her? The dragon managed to groan out. You can still speak. I'm impressed. Nevertheless, what I want with her is none of your business. The dragon and the man stared at each other for several seconds, before the dragon's eyes widened in realization, and the immortal shinobi narrowed his eyes and dashed forward. I forgot about that annoying empathic ability of yours. Nevertheless, this gives me the perfect opportunity. His blade was at the dragon's throat, the blade situally being sharp enough to draw blood. Using the blood, he quickly performed the finger-carving seal technique, using the bansho tenon to draw out the dragon's tongue, and then drawing the necessary seals on it. This is merely to ensure that you can never speak to anyone of what has taken place here. Should you try it, the seal will activate and kill you instantly. Now leave, and pray I never set my sights on you again. Otherwise, I may not be as merciful. Grandine sighed when she felt the weight lifted, and then abruptly transformed back into her ball of light form. I understand what you want with Wendy now. I could feel it. I don't trust you, and I absolutely hate you, but at least I know she's safe with you. Is that all you have to say? He asked in a bored, uncaring manner. That will be all, for you'll see for yourself why Wendy is such an amazing person, and with any luck, she'll change you, just as she did to me. Naruto Nichin, you're spacing out again. The small girl whined and stomped her foot slightly. All right then, let's begin on our way. We train as we move. He ruffled the girl's hair slightly. I still wonder though, what did that dragon mean? It was 6:30, and the sun had begun set. The tangy smell of ale permeated the bar like the foul stench of flatulence. Men rose their glasses in merriment, swinging as ire reddened cheeks and flushed necks gave testament to their states of inebriety. Others solemnly drowned their beer with the aura of utmost defeat, taking solace in the liquor that would hopeful. Why serve to distract them of their own miseries? The rest sat in quiet corners, eyes shiftily scanning the room back and forth like the pendulum of fate, their mouths constantly being obscured by ire hands as they partook in information that was far too sensitive, and far too deadly to have anyone hear. There, a man sat, named Krem. He was rugged with a diamond face and a pointed chin, had thick black short hair. He belonged to the group of merriment. He heartily chugged down a goblet of ale as he demanded for another, lazily wiping the portions of the liquor that had stained his scraggly beard. The barmaid arrived, swaying her hips as she put on the falsified smile as expected of her, and poured the man his wine. He smacked her bum, giving it 2 firm squeezes before letting out a gargled laugh as more liquor poured down his throat. He had every reason in the world to celebrate. He was a con man, but not just any type of con man. His specialty included deception. After 2 painstaking years of deceiving his mark, an extremely wealthy woman with 2 13-year-old daughters, they had gotten married. From there on, it didn't take long for there to have been a rather unfortunate accident, in which she unfortunately became the victim of an attack by dark mages, now leaving him a widower with over 600 million jewels left in the bank. The man let out a delicious chuckle as more wine poured down his throat. God, it had been disgusting sleeping with that old hag, sharing the same bed with that creature, when his tastes were more tailored towards a certain age range. Now, however, he was the legal guardian of those 2 girls, so he would make sure that he got his fill before he disposed of them. The man, despite drinking, paused as he noticed that a rather surprising person had entered the bar. No, as a matter of fact, it was as though everyone had paused to notice the person who had entered the bar. She wore a silvery gray less and strapless dress which had scale-like designs on it and stopped at her thighs. The dress ended with white and she wore a pair of black skin-tight shorts underneath, though it wasn't really visible but blended perfectly with the black leggings she wore underneath the dress. Over the gown, she possessed a short white jacket with short sleeves. She also had silver fingerless gloves with a reflective metal plate behind each glove. They matched perfectly with her armguards which reached her shoulders. Her blue hair was tied into a single long ponytail which flowed to her back, but extended no further. The hairband which tied her hair looked like miniature fangs or claws. The young girl entered the bar with a red lollipop in mouth. She proceeded to bring it out of her mouth. Wendy then had her tongue perform several maneuvers around it before putting it back in her mouth with a wet pop. Krem found his throat and lips suddenly dry, and his pants several levels too tight. He couldn't estimate the girl's age. She looked to be around 8 or 9, but she had curves in places that no one that age possessed any right having. There were also slowly developing mounds of flesh on her chest, and the con man found himself grinning. The girl was most likely a mage, but it didn't matter if you could shoot fireballs when you had the weak feeble body of a child. She was a little younger than he was used to, and it seemed that he would have to break his own personal motto just to have a little fun. The motto that had earned him ire, even amongst fellow thieves and rapscallions, was simple. If she's off the clock, she's ready to fuck. Krem watched as the young girl seemed to ask the barmaid for something, most likely someone, and the woman responded in the negative, leading the girl to sigh and walk towards the exit. Making sure she didn't get too far, Krem rapidly slammed several thousand jewel notes at the counter, not even bothering to check if he had overpaid. Because he was a bloody millionaire now. He walked out the bar, trying to find the little girl in the bustling night life of the city. He walked around the bar, noticing that she had seemingly vanished. Growling, he wanted to curse his luck, until he noticed someone with blue hair seemingly walk past a corner. Krem let his lips coil into a more dastardly smirk as he adjusted his pants. Oh, the bulge was already growing from excitement. He trailed behind the girl slowly, shadowing her every move and step, making sure to avoid being noticed, and he fancied himself a rather stealthy person. Bumping into person after person was inevitable, and avoiding the Rune Knights patrolling was another task entirely, but he took it in stride as his prize awaited him. Eventually, The girl entered an alley. And Krem discarded all notions of stealth as he dashed in after her. Yes, this was it, only for the man to freeze as he realized that the alley was a dead end and the girl was gone. Before he could question it, he felt two sharp needles pierce the back of his knees and he collapsed to the ground. Before he could let out a strangled scream of pain, a hand covered his mouth, and there he looked. Into the cold blue eyes of the same girl he had been stalking. She pulled the lollipop out of her mouth, and smiled at him. Krem felt rage as he lunged his hands out to try and strangle the little bitch. Only for two more of those absurdly sharp and long needles to pin them together and pierce the concrete floor with it. Fear and agony overwhelmed him, and he opened his mouth to plead his case. Please don't kill. He never completed the sentence as 3 needles pierced him, 2 in his throat, and a final one through the forehead. The man gurgled, for all of 3 seconds, before his body went limp. Thus ended the life of Krem the Violator. The girl, still with the smile on her face, placed the lollipop on her mouth and hopped away into the darkness. The young girl landed at a completely different location, a forest just outside the town, where a cloaked, blond man sat atop one of the high branches, his back resting against the tree itself with one leg idly swinging in the air. The mage was munching vividly on a red apple, and if he noticed the girl's arrival, he paid it no heed. "I'm back, Naruto-sensei," she said happily. "How did I do?" C-. The little girl gawked. C-. The blonde mused, tapping his chin gently before pointing at her. "You're right. C- is being generous. You get a D. But that was a flawless assassination." "Flawless." Naruto let out a long series of chuckles. "What's so funny?" she said, almost yelled, before by some unexplainable force, she found herself being gravitationally pulled to the man, and in no time at all, she was floating in the air, feeling weightless as she stared into his purple, ringed eyes. "First, you drew attention to yourself by entering the bar. You were seen, and everyone saw the man leave after you did, thereby leaving clues that can be traced to you. That's a rookie mistake, Dragonslayer." Wendy let a sheepish grin appear on her face as Naruto jumped down from the tree and tossed the apple in his hand into the air, letting it bop her head without care. "Second, you wasted 6 good Senbon to kill someone you could have easily gotten by snapping his neck. Senbon needles don't grow on trees, Dragonslayer. Replenishing the stock isn't as easy as I make it seem," he said, before lifting his finger, the girl floating once more to appear in front of him. "Third, you forgot to dispose of the evidence. Always ensure to remove the victim from the scene of the crime in order to generate false leads, and clean up the original scene of the crime to avoid gaining suspicion. It was anything but a flawless assassination. There's also the fact that you hinged on the lucky bet that he would fall for the bait. What would you have done had he ignored you? Or what would you have done had he decided that chasing you wasn't worth the hassle? Too many careless variables, Dragonslayer. Too many." Wendy frowned. Upon seeing the girl's frown, the shinobi mage poked the girl's forehead. "Ow, don't spend time thinking about what went wrong. Instead, focus on how to avoid making the same mistakes next time. Is that clear?" "Hi, Naruto-sensei." "Good. Now go stand in the corner and look intimidating. The client will be here soon." Releasing his gravitational control over the girl, Wendy sighed as she stood beside a tree, lazily dipping into her re-equipped realm, and in no time at all, she was covered with a dark hooded long coat and a pair of magical lacrima headphones. The music on the headphones were set to a soothing classical tone, and not too long after it had begun playing, the Dragonslayer's nose picked up a strong perfume approaching before her ears heard the rustle of movement and the slow approaching echo of footsteps, despite her headphones. Not too long after, there was a rustle in the bushes as a tall, blonde woman dressed in a long obscuring cloak appeared. Is it done? Your prayers have been answered," the mage said, vividly. "Rejoice, young one. Your husband could not evade the judgment that was rendered upon him by the Kage no Shinigami." The man's eyes watered. "Thank you, Naruto-sama. I owe you my life. Had you not been there when those dark mages attacked? If you wish to never be tricked again by such scum," the mage said, stretching his hand genuflect to me, "and I shall bestow upon you eternal protection that would last for now until your last breath. Swear yourself to me, your life, your soul, your body, and forever live in reverence and eminence. Your daughters and their daughters will be safe from harm for as long as the shadow stretches." Naruto gestured his hand which were covered in rings, and the woman got on one knee and kissed the ring, leading to the man smirking. "Now rise," Naruto said as she did, and the man moved in, capturing the woman in a kiss as his tongue wreathed in her and her body shuddered in pleasure. Never noticing the small inconspicuous seal that had appeared on the roof of her mouth, before it vanished. Naruto-sama. Go now. Spend time with your daughters. You will be called upon when you are needed." The woman nodded, still in daze from the kiss that left her knees weak, before she turned around and left the forest. Wendy just looked upon the whole thing passively, having seen it happen on multiple occasions throughout her entire 3 years of traveling with the blonde mage. She let the headphones come down to her neck as she pulled down the hood of her cloak and stared at her teacher with slight annoyance. "Naruto-sensei, do you always have to kiss the women?" The blonde let out a smirk. "Only if they're attractive." The dragon slayer shook her head. "Where are we going now, Naruto-sensei? Tired of me already? If I recall, you were the one who held on to me and begged to follow me." "I know, Naruto-sensei," Wendy said, "but for the past 3 years, all you've done is go from town to town, take up mysterious and shady quests, steal money, kill people, add people to the cult of Cage, sleep with women, kill more people, and then sleep with even more women. Do not take that tone with me, Dragonslayer. I have trained you well enough these past 3 years, haven't I? If you don't like the way I handle my business, then leave." And therein lay the problem. Naruto didn't want anyone changing him, for whatsoever reason, and that damned overgrown lizard Grandine seemed to have possessed the sheer arrogance to believe that Wendy would change him. He scoffed at the notion. No, he was the dark mage of Apokalpis. He was the teacher of Zirf, vanquisher of Acnologia. He would not let his heart be softened by a little girl. If anything, he had done the opposite. He had utterly hardened his heart to the point of sheer coldness. He let a smirk come onto his lips. He wondered just how Grandine would feel upon knowing that he had taught Wendy the way of the shinobi, the true shinobi way of stealth, seduction and assassination. That the cute and innocent little girl she had loved had been groomed into a fine warrior capable of assassinating men with an unflinching smile on her face. Oh wait, that was right, the dragon was dead. The energy he had sensed from the dragon was waning at a ridiculously fast pace. And it seemed that the dragon had planned to eventually vanish by hiding her soul into the little Dragonslayer girl, but of course she had never expected such an interruption to come in the form of the Mage of Apocalypse. The foolish overgrown lizard had actually returned, trying to sneak her way into the girl's body, but it was futile to try and do so when there was a sense or of Naruto's caliber constantly around the girl. Seeing as how the dragon had refused to heed his warning, Naruto promptly absorbed the dragon's soul. Wendy had never suspected that the only son he could teach her Dragonslayer attacks was because he was also a Dragonslayer, having become one by draining the soul, techniques, powers and memories of Grandine. And what he had found were rather disconcerting. It seems that while he was sealed, Acnologia had grown in strength to the point in which even Zirf began to fear the damned dragon, or Dragonslayer. And then there was the entirely convoluted plan of sending the dragons through time, of hiding in the bodies of their Dragonslayers. Naruto shook his head at the utter stupidity of it all. No matter, he would face Acnologia once more, and put an end to all the adamant stupidity. Of course, his mind for now was focused on the issue of his young charge. By all rights, the girl owed him her life. Or more accurately, he owned her life. Because she would be nothing but a rotten carcass had he not, out of some brief moment of irrational kindness, chosen to grant her a new body and save her. It's not that I don't like the way you do things, Naruto-sensei. It's just, she said, slowly, I just thought traveling with you would be more exciting than this. Naruto felt his eyebrow twitch at the subtle slight. You want excitement? How about I drop you off in front of the Rune Knight's station and let them know that you're needle assassin they've been looking for? We both know that I'd be out of there before dawn, Naruto-sensei. Naruto's eye twitched in more annoyance. Oh really? Wendy's face twisted into one of mock hurt, her hands clasped together, her eyes seemed to reflect sorrow and misery. And she even reduced her voice to a soft stutter. Rune Knight-san, I didn't know that what I was doing was bad. Please. My sensei. He forced me to do all those sick horrible things. I had nightmares about how he'd punish me if I didn't obey. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to kill anyone. Naruto's eye twitch grew further. Cheeky dragon slayer. I learned from the best Naruto sensei. And that seemed to be true. Perhaps in another world, another timeline, the girl known as Wendy would have been sheltered and loved by what she had assumed were a loving guild. She would have, however, never truly come out of her shell, and remained a shy, underwhelming little girl. But she had spent 3 years of her life around the man known as the Dark Mage of Apocalypse. He had brutally spared no expense in her training, because he knew that her new body could handle things that would have killed anyone else her age. He didn't hold back in her training one bit. At times, Naruto had intentionally made his training as harsh as possible just so the girl would eventually leave him. He expected that she would start glancing at his direction with hatred and fear, and eventually, she would either try to kill him or simply abscond with his properties in the dead of night. So it was to his surprise, that her steely orbs had weighed much more determination than he had expected. That she never seemed to hate him for his harsh training methods, nor did she seem to fear him for his reputation. She had of course, at first been put off when she had seen him kill people in cold blood. The Dark Mage had fully expected that to be the point at which the girl became disgusted with him. But she didn't get disgusted. No, she had already been pushed to the brink of her abilities due to his training, and there was no inch of squeamishness that he would have expected. And so the blonde found himself with his traveling companion, an 8-year-old GI.RL with the mind of someone twice that age, that no matter what he did, would stay by his side. She might not have been the absolutely prodigious student he possessed with Zerf, but she was honestly a better companion. Naruto-sensei, where's Carla? She was bothering me, so I put her on time out. Naruto-sensei, did you throw Carla into your pocket dimension, again? The mage let out a small smirk. I don't know. Did I? Naruto-sensei. Fine, fine. The mage flicked his wrist, a brief distortion appearing in the air as a white cat in a dress appeared, panting from lack of breath as she collapsed on the floor. You are the devil, she managed to say after several large gasps for air. Carla, Wendy, save me from this monstrous creature in human flesh. Naruto slowly palmed a kunai. What was that? Wendy grabbed the cat and covered up her mouth. Ah, nothing Naruto-sensei. It's just Carla proclaiming how much she respects you. Wendy stared at the cat. Isn't that right, Carla? Yes, the cat belligerently said. The kunai slipped back up his sleeve. That's better. Naruto wondered why in the world he had even decided to let Wendy keep the egg they had found all that while ago. In that forest, he knew an exceed egg when he saw one, and it was doubly odd to find an eggless creature in Earthland, so he decided to play along with Wendy and let her keep the cat. Of course, the small white creature was extremely annoying and its existence constantly grated on his nerves. If it weren't for Wendy, he would have killed the damned feline ages ago. Of course, the girl just had to go and bond with the thing. He sighed. At the very least, he had told the cat that there was no way he would let it stay unless it proved its usefulness in one form or another. And it had done just that by developing her flight ability, as well as ensuring to learn what little magic it could. Alright, Dragon Slayer, we're moving out. Naruto-sensei. The thing is, when you're immortal, 3 years is a really short amount of time. Naruto said, dusting his modified cloak as he stared into the darkness. Being sealed as long as he had been, he didn't actually mind wasting 3 years going around and doing random stuff just for the sake of doing random stuff. But now it was time for him to get serious. Most likely Zerf was aware of his return, and if his student was as smart as he believed, Zerf would begin sending his Aetherius pawns to retrieve him. This was because Naruto was the only person guaranteed to be capable of killing him. However, the Mage of Apocalypse didn't want to kill him, not out of some twisted sense of camaraderie or some teacher-student bond, but for the sheer fact that the only way he could kill him would result in the curse of Ankarsum being transferred unto his own person. And Naruto did not want to have such a bothersome ability. It's about time we get moving. I just NTLY got word that a demon of Zirf was spotted a few towns away and went on a rampage. The Dragon Slayer perked up. We're going to fight demons. Probably. She leapt into the air in a cheer, making the mage sweat drop. Finally. The cat on the other hand shook her head in misery, wondering why in the world she had been picked up by the insane duo. Damn. It was 15 minutes past midnight. The comfortable echo of feet crunching against the snow was the only sound which traveled for miles. Two figures moved, as though wrapped in an impenetrable layer of silence, through the long dark. Heavy falling snowflakes rained upon them like droplets from a shower head. Ferocious winds swirled around with the celerity of a divine beast chasing after its own tail, the sights of the road obstructed by a thick haze of falling powdery water that was known as snow. The cold dark air clung to the skins of the blonde man and the blue-haired girl alike. Being dragon slayers of sky, the two were able to withstand the frigid cold without so much as batting an eyelash. The same as much could not be said for the small white cat that had snuggled herself inside the little girl's clothes. Her teeth rattling endlessly like the small hand-held toys of infants. Slowly, their vision of nothing but white canvassed snow which stretched on for miles seemed to shift, to change, to morph. Around them were buildings, homes, shops, stores, schools, all of which had been reduced to an utterly debilitated state. Some had been frozen solid, others still had the thick black mar. KS to indicate the fires that had ravaged them. There was no mold to indicate the passage of time, for the weather was too cold and too harsh to let such a feature exist. Then the broke past the buildings, to a point where the snowstorm seemed to be raging at its utmost peak. The metaphorical eye of the storm could be likened to a tornado of ice, snow, hail. The rippling winds seemed to have no end to them, as though any and all that dared pass through would be consumed instantaneously. The mage of apocalypse merely grinned. Dragonslayer. The blue-haired girl nodded, already understanding what her teacher wanted her to do. Slowly, she exhaled, before taking in a long, deep breath. The vicious winds seemed to stall, as though recognizing the fact that they were being consumed, before all at once. The rotating centrifugal forces found themselves unable to withstand the might of the lungs of a dragon, and the cyclone of snow was forcefully ripped away. An outside OBS. Irver would liken the phenomenon to using a vacuum cleaner to suck away a whirlwind, and they would not be wrong, as the winds were drawn into the body of the petite little girl as she continued, seemingly endlessly, to suck away the storm. It brought a small amount of pride to Naruto, after all, considering that his training regimen had contained a harsh training of the girl's lung capacity and breath control. The Sky Dragon Slayer could hold her breath underwater for 45 full minutes, non-stop, without coming up for air. Such a feat would have been impossible normally, but with the body that Naruto had given her. Every single inch of her body had the potential to go above and beyond what was considered possible, above what was considered human. As such, due to her sheer lung capacity, her dragon's roar attack was the most lethal thing in her entire arsenal. In fact, it had been so lethal that even Naruto had told her to never use it unless she was certain that she could get away with the massive collateral damage it would cause. The mage's musings were brought to a gentle halt as the storm had vanished, and laying before them, was a massive, gargantuan pillar of ice, encasing what looked to be a monstrous creature within it. Naruto-sensei, is that the demon? Clearly Dragonslayer. You have eyes to see, do you not? Naruto-sensei, you didn't tell me the demon was already beaten. The mage's eyes twitched. That was what she was bothered about. Sighing, the mage of apocalypse activated his eyes, the power of the Rinnegan pulsing as he glanced over the form of the frozen being. Deliora. Defeated by the iced shell technique it seems, hey. Weak. Naruto shook his head. Both Deliora and the mage who had sealed it away were weak. Delior wasn't even the strongest of the Aetherius demons, if anything, he was one of the weakest. For a mage to have seemingly used iced shell, to sacrifice him herself for the sheer purpose of sealing what was effectively cannon fodder. It meant that the mages of this era were ridiculously weak. Still, the level of conviction needed to turn one's body into a frozen prison was utterly impressive. The mage would forever remain conscious, without a body, ageless and deathless, for all of eternity. It would be an utter waste of talent. Stand back, Dragonslayer. What I'm about to do might be slightly dangerous. Wendy did as told, taking several steps back while her sensei moved forward, raising his arm as he placed it against the ice. Last time I did this it was for Wendy, let's see now. The mage proceeded to activate the particular power of the Rinnegan, dragging out the soul of the mage who had sacrificed her body for the iced shell. Now confirming the woman's name and identity as memories of her life ran through his head. Naruto sighed. Unlike with Wendy, where there had been bits and pieces of the girl's flesh left in order to form a new body from her DNA, his woman had utterly transformed the entire body into ice. She wasn't dead, she just didn't have a human body for her soul and consciousness to inhabit. So that left him two options. Use his own blood to grant her a body or... He turned to Wendy. Anyo. Naruto-sensei. Why are you looking at me like that? Yes. Much better. I need your body. The girl blanched, and backed away several steps with her face burning red. I'm too young for tea that Naruto-sensei. The mage had his eye twitch. Not in that manner. Quite possibly never in that manner. There's nothing I could possibly enjoy from you. The girl seemed to act as though an arrow had been pierced through her chest. Naruto shook his head. Just walk over here and sit. The girl begrudgingly accepted the request, and Naruto proceeded to raise the Dragonslayer's left index finger, before he promptly cut it off. Ow, she said, grabbing her bleeding hand that hurt. It'll grow back in no time. That doesn't mean it still doesn't hurt. Which was true enough. Using Tsunade's yin seal releases and creation rebirth to create her new body had granted the little Dragonslayer self-regenerative ability. Ties which healed wounds at an accelerated pace. Minor wounds were all but gone after a few seconds, serious wounds would be gone in hours, fatal wounds would be fully healed in a few days, and she had once lost an entire arm, which grew back in a week. Of course, having fast regeneration didn't mean she was immune to pain. It was partially the reason Naruto didn't hold back on his training regimen. Because he knew that her body could handle it. Focusing on cut-off phalange, Naruto proceeded to apply jutsu after jutsu on it, recalling the general body shape, stature, physique, hair color, and eye color of the woman from her soul. The finger began morphing, changing, twisting until it extended to becoming the body of a woman. Naruto paid extra close attention to detail, from memory. Why he was able to recall every tiny facet and feature of the woman, even some of the ones that she wasn't consciously aware of, such as a sensitive spot or a ticklish one, making sure that the body formed was exactly the same. But not exactly the same. He made her just a tad few years younger, to approximately the age of 21, when he had seen that she was in her utmost peak and prime. Wendy and Carla simply stared at him in awe, and the Mage of Apocalypse grinned as he basked in their glory. They had never seen him do this before anyway, so it was an interesting sight for them both. Once Naruto was done, they lay a beautiful, black-haired woman lying on the cold floor, her naked form glistening under the light. Then, the Mage of Apocalypse forcefully slammed the soul into the body. No sooner had he done that, did the woman awake with a powerful gasp of air. Welcome to the land of the living. Oh. It was 16 minutes past 3 a.m. The harsh wind seemed to howl with the vengeance of a pack of wolves hunting after a lone prey as the pounding snow of the blizzard echoed like the continuous beats of a drumroll. Within this storm, a small cabin stood, somehow managing to have survived the test of time and the clash of the frigid cold atmosphere that had threatened to turn it to dust. Within the small wooden cabin, a fireplace was lit ablaze, the warm flames exuding its presence through the room as it ejected the forceful cold. A small, white cat in a dress stretched comfortably in front of the fire, curling in front of the form of a girl who had wrapped herself in blankets. And the duo slowly let themselves fall into the blissfulness that was sleep. Elsewhere in the cabin, a woman and a man lay in the room, with the woman seemingly naked, and constantly searching and tossing for something, but finding herself unable to find it. Nothing fits. None of my clothes. None of them fit. How's that possible? The man seemed to be utterly amused, as he sat down and crossed his leg on a chair, with one hand resting on a stool. I restored your body to the pinnacle of your prime. Clearly your old clothes would be ill-sized. She glanced at him, wariness still in her eyes. I remember myself at my prime. I was never this. She gestured to her body proportions, as she attempted to put on an old bra, only for it to not be able to fully contain her bust. Does it truly bother you? No, not really. She said I'm more concerned with the reason you decided to give me slightly larger breasts and butt and a thinner waistline. The smirk the man gave her sent multiple waves of chills running down her spine, which was made even odder due to the fact that she was normally immune to cold. Then he walked towards her, and slowly, she became rather conscious of the fact that she was naked as his fingers brushed against her chin. Is it not obvious? Ull managed to swallow the lump she didn't know she had in her throat. Of course she was ludicrously wary about the man who was with her. He was the Mage of Apocalypse, a renowned figure spoken about only in myths and fairy tales. Demons such as Deliora were considered insignificant in his presence, and his mere existence was a sign from the heavens that the end was near. Then, this figure comes out of nowhere and gives her a second chance at life. She had never asked for it, no. But at the same time it was not entirely unwelcome. Of course, there would always be a price. The man's gaze tore into her, and she found his body getting closer. And closer, and her chest was suddenly burning. What do you think you're doing? Tell me, woman, why do you insist on asking questions to which you already possess the answer? Yes. Why yes. The ambiguous response threw her for a loop, as she wasn't certain as to what question he had answered. Before she could question it, all at once she found herself on the bed and the man staring down at her with an amused expression on his face. Did you expect me to lie to you? No, I have no need for such forms of deception, he had said, still smirking. Do you know what would have happened had I not wandered by? You would have been a conscious block of ice for eternity, he said, interrupting her sharply. You would suffer ceaselessly and be unable to do yourself in. You would have had your mind intact, to dream, wonder and lament, but not to live, and never to die. Ull swallowed hard, and through all that, through that infinite torment, as your sense of time vanished and ages passed, as whatever is left of your brittle consciousness shatters, you would be unable to do so much as scream. Ull found her head spinning. His very presence was toxic, and his words had a disorienting effect on her, making her feel as though she had drank far too much liquor and was now experiencing a very harsh manner of lightheadedness. Now tell me, is it wrong of me to wish something in return from saving you from such a fate? Is it still wrong even if you yourself would find pleasure in it? She found herself giving in to his words as his left hand, filled with such power and warmth, slowly traced her body, leisurely traveling and caressing her in spots that sent more and more shivers down her spine. You've been cold for a long time, Ull. For far too long. Even before you sacrificed your body to seal Deliora, you had been cold, cold and alone. The man had said, his finger slowly tracing down her chest. All I wish to do is show you warmth. To put a fire inside of you that no one will ever be able to put out. Ull bit her lip as she gazed into those purple-ringed eyes that held such passion, and as she fought the parts of her mind that tried to tell her that the being in front of her was pure evil. But his ministrations, his smell, his touch, his warmth, they all compelled her to give in. Tell me, Ull, is that so wrong? She surrendered. For the first time in what had felt like ages, Ull felt the heat of a man enchant her loins. And never had she screamed so loud. Damn, it was 2 minutes past noon. A small, blue-haired girl sighed incessantly to herself as she had switched from her combat attire to a plain, dark blue dress. She slowly supervised the eggs she had frying while she grumbled, and the white cat that lay beside her seemed to be lost in a river of grumbling and utter perverseness. I don't know how you stand him, Wendy. Oh, and the nerve of that woman. As if the creaking bed wasn't enough, she had nerve to go on shrieking like a banshee all night long. I could barely get any sleep. It's just the way Naruto-sensei is, Carla, you'll get used to it. That's easy to say when you can go for YS without sleeping due to whatever that monster did to your body. The cat said with a huff. I don't know how you can defend him. Even history says that he's evil. Naruto-sensei isn't evil, Carla, he's just misunderstood. The cat stared at her, shaking its head. I think he's brainwashed you. Yes, that must be it. It's the only reason why you can tolerate the things he does. Sleeping around shamelessly with women. I suppose I should just be grateful that he has enough morals not to let those filthy hands of his touch you in such disgusting ways. Wendy sighed, allowing herself to flip over the eggs as she listened to Carla rant on about her sensei. She really didn't know or understand why she felt a spark of annoyance anytime she saw her sensei with another woman, like last night, in which the constant screams and moans had irritated her endlessly. And then that woman's body. Wendy frowned as her hand went up to her chest. She was technically 8 years old, but according to her sensei, her mental age was supposed to be at least twice that due to an error in the making of her body. He didn't know how to accurately regenerate her brain, the brain of an infant, so in the process, he had done the next best thing. He regenerated it to what he hoped was the brain of a teenager, with just tad bits of childishness thrown in. It had caused problems when he had dropped her off at a village and told her to mingle with the children because he didn't want her to get socially stunted. She had ended up manipulating all of them into treating her like she was a goddess. They waited on her hand and feet, gave her their best toys, their meals, and more, not even realizing that they were doing such. Their parents instead had only felt that she was far too smart for her age, and had warned their children to stay clear of her. It only proved to her sensei that her mindset was out of sync for her age. Unfortunately, he had no way of fixing it, and even if he did, she doubted he would do so. He had claimed that her original body had been destroyed and she had almost died, and so, he had given her this one, a body which would grow and mature to be the perfect Dragonslayer form. The only problem was the annoying feature of her brain and body being out of sync with certain features, which made it so that the girl couldn't just wait to grow up. Speaking of grown-ups, the black-haired woman seemed to have woken up, as she slowly stumbled into the room. She was wearing nothing but a t-shirt that was slightly tight, and a pair of underwear that was several shades too small for her. She walked in at first with a slight limp to her step, but eventually, the limp seemed to vanish as she found herself in the kitchen. She blinked in confusion as she regarded Wendy, and she lunged. The Dragonslayer immediately prepared herself to dodge an attack, only to realize that she wasn't being attacked as she was swept up into a smothering hug. So cute. Wendy struggled to be free from the woman's grasp as she felt a tick mark appear on her forehead. This woman seemed to be annoying her more and more. Let go of me or you'll regret it. The threat would have possibly been more intimidating had the woman not been pinching and stretching both her cheeks as she said it. You're Naruto-kun's apprentice, aren't you? That's Naruto-sama to you. Ul managed to let an eyebrow raise in confusion as she took in the angry gaze of the girl. Ul gave her a coy smile. Wendy seemed to falter for a second and don't get too comfortable with him. You're just a random fling he'll forget about in no time at all. Wendy's lips morphed into a frown as she found herself unable to come up with anything. Instead she simply huffed and grabbed her meal. And no breakfast for you. Wendy tried to ignore the burning sensation she felt on her cheeks as she sat down elsewhere to eat her breakfast, trying to block out the sound of the woman's laughter. Eventually, the girl glanced up to see Naruto walk into the room, wearing nothing but a pair of boxers which barely contained a clearly visible bulge as he was exuding that supreme aura of excellence. The blonde's body was smooth, perfectly toned without looking like a buff gorilla. He managed to find the perfect body-muscle balance for both agility and strength. Wendy's face lit up even worse. Naruto-sensei, put on some clothes. You don't tell me what to do, Dragonslayer. Besides, aren't you a little too young to start fantasizing about my body? Hearing the woman laugh even further seemed to make her entire cheeks glow from embarrassment as she tried to block out the pounding blood in her ears. Naruto-sensei, you've been whining too much these days, Dragonslayer. Perhaps you've finally hit puberty. The question made her jaw drop. It's a good thing we have Ul here to teach you all about the birds and the bees. Wendy's blush grew from mere embarrassment to sheer mortification, as the woman's laughter increased in volume. She growled under her breath as she stormed out of the cabin, the sound of laughter being the last thing she heard as she slammed the door. The Mage of Apocalypse watched his apprentice leave with a slam and merely shrugged. She'd be back. She always came back. He shamelessly grabbed the breakfast that the girl had made for herself and proceeded to eat it without a second thought, disregarding the woman who was staring at him oddly. You're not going to go after her? The mage snorted. Why should I? It's freezing cold out there. She's the Sky Dragon Slayer. She's immune to the cold. The woman seemed surprised by the information, but shook her head nonetheless. There are wolves and quite a number of bears around these parts. She can handle herself. She's just a child, and she's my apprentice, Naruto said, growing tired of the argument. Or have you so easily forgotten who I am? Ultir gazed into his eyes, those rippling orbs of power, his entire presence exuding a warmth and aura and all at the same time, a piercing cold existence. There was no shortage of mysteries about the Mage of Apocalypse, and even though she had, for all of a few hours, squirmed underneath his touch and his presence, it seemed that she barely knew him at all. No, she said at last, I haven't forgotten who you are. Then think twice next time before you consider questioning the way I groom my students. Naruto said, moving over to her form, and then gently raising her chin to glance into his eyes. You know, don't you? The way she looks at you. It's just infantile crush that'll wear off in time. And if it doesn't, his gaze seemed to search her for something. And it looked as though he had found it, before they seemed to soften for just a fraction of a second. It was almost unnoticeable, before the purple orbs returned to their steely gaze. Wendy is not your daughter. Ul winced. I never said she was. You never had to. The silence stretched in the room for several seconds, only occasionally interrupted by the roar of wind outside. Until the sound of hurried footsteps reached Naruto's ears and the door was promptly slammed open. Naruto-sensei. Back so. Deliora. Deliora broke free from the ice. Two heads snapped into her direction, causing one to swear, and the other to simply let a confident smirk appear on his face. I see. It seems I was right about the iced shell break-in. Once the mage's consciousness within the ice was removed, Ul turned on him with fury. You knew this would happen. Do not take that tone with me, woman, Naruto said, standing as he re-equipped his usual attire. You are about to witness just why I am called the Mage of Apocalypse. Ul was no stranger to opposition. Upon being revived or resurrected, or whatever term could possibly be used, said to describe the fact that she now had a body once more, her first instinct had been to immediately track down her two students. She wanted to find Gray and Leon and let them know that she was okay, that she was alive. No doubt Gray would have been killing himself with guilt over feeling responsible for what had happened to her. Unfortunately, it seemed that fate had kept something else entirely in store for her. She had been revived by one of the least likely people she could quite possibly expect, and the man hadn't even bothered lying to her about why he had chosen to revive her. It was both utterly exhilarating and at the same time, insanely terrifying. This key fact was the reason why she just could not simply leave on her way to find her students. They would be happy to see her, yes. But of course they would want to know just how or just what or just who had saved her. And once they did find out who it was, she would find herself in one of the most secured prisons in the world within hours. She trusted her students not to tattle on her, but the people who they might now be affiliated with didn't have any reason to not immediately turn her in. This of course was all assuming that the mage, Naruto, even chose to let her go in the first place. He had been the one to restore her body, who knew if he had done something else while at it that made sure she could never leave him. He was possessive, and she vividly remembered how passionately they had gone at it. She remembered the sheer passion to which he had claimed her. No one had ever made Ul feel so much and feel so profusely before, not even her previous husband. Even though the man was touted as being the most evil thing since burnt bread, she couldn't exactly see it. There was arrogance, oh there was a ton of it, which was rightly deserved considering his reputation. There was cockiness, and an aura around him which he made it seem as though there was nothing in the world he couldn't have if he put his mind towards getting it. There was of course, a lot of lust and perverseness, much more than she had expected, as her loins had laid testament to that. But none of those things made him inherently evil. So why was he so notoriously feared? Ul finally found out. What in the world is he doing? Don't underestimate Naruto-sensei. She had been cloaked in a long black robe. As she and the man's apprentice, Wendy, she recalled, sat together on a high vantage point where they watched Deliora rampage. The man seemed to walk towards the massive demon, with neither fear nor hesitation nor trepidation. Instead he walked straight toward the demon and crossed his arms. Then, for a brief second, it seemed as though he was conversing with the massive demon. Ul could not hear what he had said, but she did realize that the demon had responded. Before she could question the ludicrousness of it all, her ears were filled with a sharp, shrill, ringing noise. And gods of wind descended upon the earth. It was carnage, sheer and total carnage. Upon being released from his icy prison, the demon of Zirf had gone instantly on a rampage in the land. Entire forests were engulfed in a magnanimous conflagration, the earth had been shattered and molten in multiple places, and the beast roared into the skies with a frenzied rage. The only consolation was that there was no one living near the demon for miles. Everyone had heard about how Deliora had gone on a rampage, and promptly been sealed at Brago, and for several hundred miles, there were no settlements for the demon to ravage. So it had turned its sights to simply destroying nature. It would destroy the nature of anything and everything until it eventually got to a populated location, in which it would kill and kill and kill. Its hunger for blood would not be sated, its thirst for destruction would not be quenched, and it would never be satisfied until it had ravaged everything. Or so it thought. The demon was able to pause, once as it spotted the presence of a human in front of him. But therein lay the problem. The demon knew this human. He casually strolled out to the front of the demon, glancing at the giant enormous being without so much as batting an eye. Deliora. The demon froze. The demon froze solid, actually responding as that particular voice could only belong to one human. No matter the era, no matter the time, Deliora would never be able to mistake the human who had possessed that voice. Yes, it was the human who was responsible for being freed from his iced prison, just as it was the same human who his creator and master could never defeat. Deliora was a demon, but he was no fool. When he could not defeat his own master, the chances of defeating his master's master was near non-existent. For the first time in a long time, Deliora opened its mouth to speak. Naruto-sama, you have returned. Indeed I have, Deliora, and from what I have found, you have been a very bad demon. Have I displeased you, Naruto-sama? You were created, all higher-tier demons of Zirf were created, for one purpose and one purpose only. To kill Zirf. Have you forgotten this purpose? No, I have not. Then why are you wasting your efforts rampaging pointlessly? It was a valid question. In all honesty, he had no true reason to do so other than because he could. It seemed that the blonde human had also come to the same realization. A shame. I'm afraid I'm going to have to end your existence here, Deliora. The demon didn't deem him with a response. He already knew what his fate would be once he had sensed the man arrive. At the very least, Deliora decided he was not going to go out without a fight, at the very least. It opened its mouth, preparing to charge a death beam that would hit the futon. Sho Odama Resenranshuriken. The demon was far too slow. A shrieking, shrill noise fend anything for miles around before a massive flying ball of razor-sharp wind slammed into the massive demon and sent it skidding several miles while the rotating blade tore into the being's flesh. Just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, the second piercing ball of wind crashed into him, and magnified the effect of the original, leaving the massive demon trapped in a hurricane of microscopic wind blades that utterly dissected him on a microscopic level, doing repeated damage to cell after cell, until there was nothing left. Once the winds cleared, there was neither any dust nor any blood to prove that the mighty Deliora had even existed. The mage simply let a smirk color his features as he dusted his palms and walked away. Damn. By the time Naruto returned to both of his girls, he found himself smirking at their responses. Wendy was staring at him with stars in her eyes, like an awestruck fan who had just witnessed their favorite celebrity pull off a miraculous stunt. He would never admit it out loud, due to the fact that he didn't want the girl to stop, but Wendy was a refreshing breath of air that he could always count on to lighten his mood and feel better. He was warming up to her slowly. He just wished she stopped seeing him under certain lights. He wasn't stupid. He could sense emotions. It hadn't been hard for him to realize when his apprentice started seeing him in more ways than as just the arch-bastard teacher. However, he had given his word to Grandine, and that was the truth. He wasn't a lolicon. Perhaps if she were older. He turned his gaze to all felt satisfaction upon noticing that her eyes finally showed the fear that was to be expected from all those who heard his name be uttered. Her heart was in the right place, she needed to know just who was in charge when it came to the way things were done, and that she was not to tell him how to run his business. There had been the constant hesitancy in her eyes earlier. as it seemed that she could not fully understand or comprehend that he really was the same person touted about in legends, and it had only taken a brief demonstration of his power to prove to her otherwise. Now, however, there was a large amount of begrudging respect that he could sense from her. The respect and fear mingled in just the right amounts, which was what Naruto needed. In a single hit, too, if he wanted to be technical, he had killed the very same being that she had failed to even so much as stop, let alone slow down, and had resorted to sacrificing her life in order to stop it. Naruto walked over to the shell-shocked woman and placed his finger on her chin once more, before grinning. "Now do you understand? I am the Dark Mage of Apocalypse. All those who go against me face their own personal Armageddon," he said, smirking. "Now that you have seen this, 2 choices lay before you all." "Choices?" The woman seemed to gulp. "The first is to leave and chase after the fragments of your old life, and to try and fit yourself once more into the lives of your students, and I will let you do so." "But," Naruto smirked. "Oh, Ul was far smarter than she let on, which was good. If I ever see you again, I will take away that which I have given freely." It was as ambiguous as possible, and Naruto watched her eyes. Most likely she would assume that he was talking about her body. But in actuality, it could have been anything he had freely given her. If she did choose to leave him, the blonde wouldn't fault her. No, he wouldn't kill her either for it. If anything, it would just make things more interesting, as he wondered if she would be able to refuse or resist his temptation and seduction. And the second choice: stay by my side, stay with me and become stronger. Strong enough to oppose and topple beings like Deliora with a single breath. Strong enough to never have to sacrifice yourself to fix the mistakes of your loved ones. Her eyes, they seemed to be considering it, and Naruto decided to pull out his trump card. "With me, you can become strong enough to find out the truth about your daughter." And that was it. My daughter. Make your choice, Ul. Once it is made, there is no turning back. This was the one thing that the blonde was excruciatingly strict on. If she betrayed him after swearing to join him, she would die. He did not forgive traitors. Not anymore. He turned back to Ul and saw it clearly in her eyes. Her choice was made, and there was no turning back. It was 12 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. One particular blue-haired dragonslayer found herself peeved beyond all logic and human comprehension due to growing tired of hearing the grunts of her teacher and the frantic, heated moans of that accursed woman with her accursed ice make techniques. Every single night, she had eventually fought the woman, as a test of sorts, and somehow, someway, the battle had ended in a draw. It was the most mind-boggling thing that had happened to her, that for all of her strengths, she had failed to defeat that woman. Of course, the woman had also failed to defeat her, but to Wendy, a draw was as good as a loss. Her sensei had claimed that he had expected something of the sorts, but Wendy was inclined to feel that he might have been slightly disappointed. What did it matter that Ul at her peak was a prime candidate for the title of Wizard Saint? She was the Sky Dragon Slayer and the apprentice of one of the most powerful mages to have ever walked the earth. It still meant that she had much to learn. As such, the girl had been sent on another assassination mission once more, as per the request of her teacher, and she was utterly pleased to leave the vicinity. Because if she had to hear Ul scream out an orgasm one more time, she was going to lose her mind. The Dragon Slayer crept up a wall, utilizing chakra to stick to it, as she made her way into the castle. With a preternatural gust of speed, she opened a window and grabbed the ledge, flipping in silently as the window closed behind her without a click. She instantly leapt to the ceiling, sticking to it as she made her way through what was essentially a large mansion, doing her best to stay out of sight. Her sensei had insisted performing this mission before nightfall, telling her that if she could sneak into someone's house in broad daylight and kill him without either alerting the guards nor the servants, then he'd concede giving her an A, and teach her a new S-ranked kinjutsu. Needless to say, Wendy was all up for the challenge. Her sensei rarely taught her jutsu from his massive arsenal, due to the fact that he believed that she should, first and foremost, master the ones she did have before he even thought about giving her any more. So a chance to learn a jutsu, and one that S-rank at best, was a chance she was not going to skip out on. When she moved, Wendy ensured to do so with celerity and purpose. Finding her way into the mansion, she was almost completely sickened when she noticed the sheer level of narcissism possessed by the owner of the mansion. There were golden statues of himself adorned in almost every hallway and every corner. His toilet bowl was golden and looked like him, and there was even a giant golden statue with his tongue. Yui sticking out that went for several layers down the mansion. Everlu-sama wants his dinner served early today. The Sky Dragon Slayer froze as her nose instantly sniffed out the presence of some one that were not supposed to have been there. It was absurd, as though the giant, bulking, pink-haired gorilla of a woman dressed in a maid's outfit had appeared out of nowhere. Wendy had already known of the other ugly maids, but the woman's presence had thrown her for a complete loop. Then there was something off about the woman. She didn't smell human. The woman turned in her general direction and Wendy had to slink into another room unnoticed, finding herself in a large library as she used her tree walking and rapidly climbed to the top of a particularly tall bookcase. The pink-haired gorilla woman walked in and searched around, forcing the Dragon Slayer to slowly but gently finger the Senbon needles at her side. The woman walked around, leisurely, as though searching for something. And Wendy let the Senbon slip into her fingers, ready to take aim. Thankfully, before the Dragon Slayer would have to kill more than one target, the gorilla-like woman left the room. Wendy sighed to herself, letting out the breath she didn't know she was holding before she moved out of the library. She stared at it though. It was a rather large and extensive library, and she truly doubted if the man would need it all. There was a slightly bibliophilic part of her that wanted to grab everything and seal it into a storage scroll, but that wasn't her reason for the mission. So instead she stealthily moved out of the library, ensuring to evade the maids, before she eventually found one maid who seemed to be carrying a plate of food. Wendy was crawling on the ceiling with chakra, and she caught up to the woman. She was tempted to knock the woman unconscious and use the henge to take her form, but she shuddered at how ugly the woman was, and felt that there was no way she was going to transform into that. Instead, upon finding the door which most likely belonged to the room of her target, Wendy glanced around the room, finding an airway vent which she headed towards. Staring at the screws on it, she brought forth her nails, lengthening them at will, before she rapidly unscrewed all four of them, and caught the vent cover before it fell. Then, she snuck her way inside it and placed it back to avoid suspicion. She crawled, ensuring to avoid making even the slightest of noises, passing several turns as her nose followed the maid's smell, and she even Julie found herself staring down at a bedroom, in which a short, slightly fat and pudgy man groped the ugly maid. Wendy had to stop herself from throwing up. Once the maid had left the room, the Dragon Slayer decided it was time up. Taking in a deep breath of air, she began taking in a deep breath of air. All at once, all the oxygen in the room was drawn towards her mouth, and she ignored the strangled gasps of the man in the room as he tried to breathe but found himself unable to do so with absolutely no air present. Wendy continued to consume the air, drawing upon it for what was over 5 minutes as the man had begun rolling on the floor and frantically grasping at his throat, and over, until his eyes rolled into the back of his head and he went still. She still continued for several more minutes, just in case he was faking, and upon determining that he wasn't, she kicked upon the grate and landed with a soft crouch into the room. Then she moved over to her target, and checked for a pulse. There was no doubt. Duke Everlu was dead. She grabbed the man's body, hoisting it over herself with a strength utterly unexpected from a girl her age, and then she moved into his bathroom. Focusing on the large golden bathtub as she tossed him in and put on both taps of hot and cold water. She walked out of the bathroom, only to freeze when she noticed the giant ugly gorilla-like maid seemingly appear in the room. Wendy swore under her breath. Just when she had been hoping for a break. "You killed Master Everlu." She spoke the sentence in such a manner that implied it was a question. But wasn't a question, and it threw Wendy for a loop. "You don't seem too torn up about it. He was a horrible master." It was a hunch, a weird hunch, based on the fact that her smell was off. But Wendy went with it anyway. You're not human." "No, I am not." All at once she transformed from being an ugly, grotesque-looking thing to a young, beautiful woman with brilliant pink hair, wearing a maid's outfit with a certain chain around it. "I am the Virgin, Virgo." Wendy. Virgo nodded. "My celestial spirit key is in Everlu's top desk. You have potential as a summoner, even though you do not seem to be the type. For now, Without a master to sustain me, I have to return to the spirit realm. Her form seemed to glitter it before fading. I do hope we meet again, Wendy-sama. Wendy mused over the odd meeting. Of all the things she had possibly expected, meeting with a celestial spirit was not one of them. She shook her head and decided to continue with her mission. Once she was done creating a fake crime scene that would look like a suicide, she moved over to the man's desks and tables, finding the key that Virgo had mentioned. Fingering the golden tool before she threw it into her pocket, deciding that she'd show Master the key once she was done. She then began searching through Everlu's documents and files, her face twisting into one of disgust upon seeing just what was contained amidst it all. Slavery, wrongful imprisonment, kidnapping, trafficking and smuggling. Wendy frowned as she looked through it all. When she had been assigned to kill him, she had never questioned it, just as she hadn't questioned all of the 12 other people she had killed on her sensei's instructions. However, it was only after she had killed them that she realized they were all scumbags or rapists or mass murderers, and she didn't know if her sensei had intentionally let her kill these people because he cared about the society and felt that the world would be better off without them, or because he didn't want her to bury herself in guilt from committing cold-blooded murder, by letting her know that the people she killed were vermin. She sighed. She would never truly understand her sensei. His methods of doing things were odd, and he cared about her even though everything he did seemed to suggest otherwise. Shaking her head, Wendy took the documents about Everlu's multiple hidden resorts, lands and caches, as well as everything that had to do with his wealth. He was scum, but he was a rich scum. And for some weird reason, her sensei was amassing a large amount of wealth from all sorts of scum like him. When she said large, she meant large, because her sensei had almost got over 500 billion jewels over the last few years, and she had no idea as to what he wanted to use all that money for. It was like he was planning to fund a war or something. Still, with her mission complete, and her purpose served, the Sky Dragonslayer stealthily made her way out of Everlu's room, and left the house without so much as making a sound. Dark Apocalypse Mage, Naruto. Elsewhere. Again. Ice Make. Rose Garden. A massive pillar of frozen thorns and roses emerged from the ground, twisting, turning and spreading out with the purpose of freezing the mage who stood opposite her. But the second the ice made contact with him, the ice instantly melted, falling apart into nothing but ordinary water. Again, Ul found herself gritting her teeth. It was almost completely pointless to try and freeze him with her ice. Nothing she did seemed to have an effect on him. Her ice always either shattered or fell apart before it ever came close to him, yet he iced it and insisted on making her continue to attack him in futility. Ice Make. Rose Garden. Once more, an even larger mass of thorny ice shaped in the form of a rose vine launched forth towards the Uzumaki, only managing to come within his presence before they all shattered and melted into another puddle of water. Again, what's the point? You've made it overwhelmingly clear that I can't harm you with my magic. For an ice mage, you're rather hot-tempered. Then he had literally dragged her out of bed and put clothes on her and brought her out to practice. So she found herself now dressed in an outfit that wasn't overtly revealing, yet perfect for battle. Now dressed in what was essentially a dark blue kipao or Chinese short dress that was modified to allow a far wider range of movement than a normal kipao. She also wore white sandal boots and a blue leotard with dark brown sheer pantyhose and a blue thong underneath with her kipao. Her short hair was still in place, and overall she found herself liking the look much more than she had expected, as it allowed her mobility and dexterity to perform her magic, and was somehow extremely sturdy. According to his apprentice, he had been the one to also design the outfit for the younger girl, and if the mage wasn't bent on whatever plan he possibly had for the world, he'd make a killing from being a fashion designer. The Sorcerer's magazine would probably never stop hiring him to dress up their models. Your ice is strong, but at the same time, it is weak. The mage said at last. I'm not even melting it. What do you mean you're not melting it? Then how? Ice is a combination of water and wind. It's an elemental fusion. As such, all I am doing is breaking apart the bonds of wind fused within it. Once that happens, the ice falls apart. As though to illustrate, she watched, with utmost disbelief, as he raised an arm into the air, and in a single motion, a giant ice dragon appeared. without even having to chant or make any incantations. Then, he waved his hand, and the ice vanished, but rather than the dragon vanishing with it, it remained in the form of a water dragon which lunged towards her. Ul brought forth her ice magic as she froze the water dragon solid, and then it crumbled to the ground as a slushy mess of snow. If you are able to create ice so strong that even once the wind's cooling it is removed, the shape of the water is retained, then your ice will become one step closer to reaching the pinnacle of ice magic. The pinnacle? Ul asked. Before her mind drew forth its own conclusions. Do you mean absolute zero? Yes. Ul shook her head. That's a myth. Absolute zero is not a myth. He said it is a forgotten, forbidden magic capable of generating ice so cold that anything it freezes is damaged permanently on a molecular level. It is ice that transcends comprehension and the roots of the frozen magic that can slay even gods. Anything frozen by it can never truly be thawed. As though trying to prove a point, the man drew in air from the atmosphere and all at once, the weather became a serious frigid cold. The easiest spell to learn under absolute zero is the iced shell. An ice that never thaws, but must sacrifice one's own body and consciousness to keep it so. That alone gives you the understanding of just how powerful it is. Ul's eyes widened. She had always believed that all those tales of a higher form of ice magic being mere tales, but here was a living, breathing legend, telling her that it truly existed. You want me to learn this magic? Again I ask you, woman, why must you ask questions to which you already possess the answer? Ul frowned. She didn't understand. Why are you training me? I don't understand. It seems that my student, Zirf, has gone and built himself an army. It is still slowly in the works, and I intend to conquer it and make it mine. Ul gulped. The black mage Zirf versus the mage of Apocalypse Naruto. She wondered just what she had gotten himself into. While I am a crusher of armies, attempting to wage a one-man war on Alvarez would be stupid because my student knows me well, he knows what I can do, and there is no doubt that he has placed contingencies to stop me. So instead, I will raise my own army to topple his. You want to raise an army? I only need 9 individuals. Naruto said 9 solid, capable mages that I will mold into my own image and grant upon them powers that will make the title of Wizard Saint seem like a golden star handed out to retards in a kindergarten class. And I'm one of them. It was a statement of fact, but her tone indicated that she was more of questioning him than confirming it. He walked over to her and planted a kiss on her mouth, granting her that familiar feeling of lightheadedness as his tongue explored her mouth like a cat playing in a litter box. Once his lips detached, he once more gave her that familiar, cocky grin. Yes, you are. Ul nodded, not trusting her voice at this point. Suddenly a thought came to her, and she didn't know why she voiced it. Why do I have a feeling all 9 of these warriors are going to be women? He gave her a cocky grin once more before he shrugged. Women do possess a potential that is more satisfying to bring out. Whether it is in battle or in bed. Ul's breath hitched as the man's hands found themselves trailing down her legs and reaching to a spot that he had become rather intimately familiar with. Her hand reached out to stop him, and he gazed at her with an amused expression. Oh, what's this now? In case you've forgotten, I own you. And why would it matter? So I don't get led on. So I don't end up falling for someone who'll never feel the same way. So I don't invest my feelings into you. For a second, he recoiled as though physically slapped. You'd fall in love with me. Me, he worded it as though it were an abstract concept. I am the mage of Apocalypse. I have defeated hundreds and killed thousands more. I am destruction incarnate. I am still human. There was a cold, frigid silence. You are still human. Human with thoughts and feelings and dreams and goals just like anyone else, she said, and it doesn't matter if you're a god or the devil. Even they have emotions. Even they feel lonely. Careful woman. Ul found herself pinned to the ground faster than she could think, his purple eyes burning as she felt the overwhelming presence of his killing intent. It would be wise for you to remember that as much as I enjoy you, you are not irreplaceable. Is that clear? Ul nodded, ignoring the lump in her throat. Crystal. Good. Now his hand rapidly went to work on her body as Ul witnessed a certain hungry gaze on him she had never seen before. Ul's voice would later become hoarse from how loudly she screamed. Naruto-sensei is never this late. Wendy sighed to herself as she stood outside a deserted cabin, in which she had been expecting to meet a shadow clone of her sensei or the man himself, but she had found neither. She left the cabin, eventually, taking the absence of the man to mean that either his shadow clone had found something or someone that was particularly interesting it had followed. Or there was something else at stake. "Carla, we're going out for a walk." The cat appeared by her side, though slowly as she grumbled. A useful ability that Wendy had decided was a must for Carla to learn was invisibility. It made it better when she combined her invisibility with using her wings to help Wendy fly, making it seem as though the little girl could fly of her own accord. While ensuring that the cat never became a target, Wendy let her companion hop on her shoulder as she let herself wander deeper into the forests surrounding the cabin, and far off the outcropping of stony hills that lay beyond. Carla was asleep, having being tired from the harsh training regimen she had to withstand each and every day, and Wendy found herself comfortable in her silence as she moved through the woods. The Dragon Slayer had often wondered how differently her life would have been had she never been found by her sensei. As he had said, she would have most likely been dead at this point. So it was moot to wonder. Her real problem, however, was wondering why her foster mother, why Grandine had left her. Why had the dragon just simply chosen to abandon her, out of the blue? After making so many promises about their time together, after lavishing her with praise upon praise and with gifts and kindness, she had, all at once, forcefully stripped her of it without even a second thought. Had it all been a lie? Was Grandine merely leading her on, so to speak? Had she truly loved her? Wendy didn't know. Her only way to find out was to eventually find her. And once she did find the dragon, she would demand answers. She would demand the truth from her. She would want to know if everything had been a lie. Therein lay the difference between her sensei and her mother figure. Her sensei didn't mince his words with her. He was a harsh taskmaster. He utterly and ruthlessly trained her to the point that her body had been laid broken and beaten and forced her to rise back up. Many people said he was pure evil, but Wendy disagreed. It was there in her sensei's eyes, the warmth and kindness that had turned frigid, turned utterly. Why frozen? Because he had once cared too much, had once loved too much, had once showed too much. Her sensei never talked about his past, and Wendy was always careful not to probe too much into it, for he believed that the past was gone. And all that was left, and all that was supposed to be looked forward to, was the future. The Dragon Slayer's nose turned upwards as she picked up a trio of strange scents. She stopped, crouching down on the dirty path in the forest, as her eyes picked up the sign of tracks, footprints belonging to 3 people. Thankfully, her sensei had shown her the proper way to analyze such things as her eyes picked out the marks and made her deductions. The first set of print was large and looked indented deeply, most likely indicating a male figure, burly, large and quite possibly tall. The second was smaller, and not as heavy, but still produced a slight prominence that led Wendy to believe it belonged to that of a woman, most likely in her mid-teens and of somewhat average height. The third, however, was the lightest, and from the way the tracks followed it was almost like the girl had a quite literal spring to her step, and it was the lightest of them all. Why does this feel like I'm about to enter a fairy tale? Wendy sighed to herself as she remembered one of the few story books she had read about a girl who had met 3 bears, each one possessing almost the exact same characteristics she had just ascribed to the footprints. Then, of course, the scent she was able to glean off the footprints were just odd. The first smelled like wild monsters and beasts, the second smelled oddly and dangerously of demons, and the third had the joyful, enigmatic aroma of cute, fluffy animals. And it made no sense to her whatsoever. Her curiosity piqued. Wendy found herself following the scents and the prints, just to see where they might lead. Using the method of travel taught to her by her sensei, Wendy leapt up into the trees, jumping from tree to tree in quick, rapid bursts of movement that wasted no energy. Her eyes were no longer trained on the tracks because once her nose had caught the scent, she could easily follow it to wherever it may lead. It took her several minutes of tree hopping, and for a second she wondered if it was a futile exercise and she should just have returned back to the cabin to see if her sensei had returned. Of course she remembered that if he did arrive, her sensei would easily be able to track her down at the very least, or she'd be able to sniff him out due to his unique smell. Oh, that meant she had some free time to herself to explore and adventure. The Sky Dragonslayer's mind was drawn back to the present as she could hear the upcoming roar of a creature, as well as the wild echoes of a battle. And it gave her pause, for all of several seconds. "Carla, I need you to stay here." The cat groggily rubbed her eyes with her paw. Hat Wendy, gently propping her fell-in companion up against a tree and ensuring she was put in such a way that would ensure she didn't fall. The Sky Dragonslayer dashed as quickly as she could, moving through the thick foliage until she exited the layer of trees and found herself at a rocky outcropping, staring down at a scene she never quite expected to see. In an outcropping, there was a massive, gargantuan-looking beast with thick, bony horns and strong muscular arms fighting against a woman that had a long draconic, demonic-looking tail and dressed in a skin-tight suit with demonic gauntlets on each arm. Wendy could telephone that these were the same people that she had sniffed out earlier, but she was surprised that they were fighting, considering that their tracks had indicated that they were supposed to be walking together. As the Sky Dragonslayer observed the fight, she noted that the woman was actively holding back, missing key chances to make critical moves and blows, restraining the strength of her attacks. And she kept yelling towards the monster. The monster of course seemed to have no such restrictions against her, and it brutally caught her in its hands and slammed her against the rocky earth like he was serving a basketball on a tennis court, sending the woman skidding onto the ground with a pained grasp as her skin was harshly grated like cheese. Then all at once, the form of the woman changed. She was a slim woman of below average height with long white hair wearing a gothic-looking, overly revealing outfit. She donned a dark, skimpy sleeveless shirt adorned with some light curved motifs on the chest. A pair of leather shorts held up by a studded belt with a demonic-looking buckle and thigh-high boots with stiletto heels, each bearing a skull adorned by a flower on their upper front parts. She also sported a bracelet shaped like a demonic arm around her right wrist, a ring on the same hand's middle finger and dark nail polish. Wendy drank in the form of the girl, both with slight curiosity and annoyance, but found herself having no time to question the girl's fashion choices as she was struggling to stand up, and as the massive beast walked towards her, slowly. Wendy's mind was drawn towards one particular book in Naruto's collection of bestsellers called Ika Ika, which the mage was publishing under the name of Jiraiya the Gallant. She remembered that one edition had a rather notorious, vividly described scene of monsters and unwitting girls, and if that was what was about to happen, the Sky Dragonslayer would be out of there faster than lightning could streak across the sky. Thankfully, it seemed that things weren't going to turn down that nastily perverted route, as the creature's only goal was sheer carnage. The woman tried to move but found herself unable to do so. And Wendy had feared that it was the end for her. Right up until the third person she had sniffed out but hadn't seen appeared in between the monster and the creature. She was a younger short white hair, and wearing a short, dark red dress with a white collar and bow. Up on her arms above her elbows, she wore gold rings with a pale pink fabric flowing down from them, and she wore tall black socks along with brown shoes. What is she doing? She seemed to be talking to the creature, as though trying to calm the massive beast with words would actually be effective against it. Or as though it would somehow work. Wendy shook her head, noting finally that the creature also seemed tired of her speech and had rose at hand to strike. And that was when she moved. With preternatural speed, Wendy crossed the distance, channeling both wind chakra and her own special brand of magic through her lengthened claws. She dove down, preventing the beast from striking down the girl as her claws countered its strike. Just like her sensei had taught her, she rendered upon no mercy. And she cleaved through the beast's head like a hot knife through butter. Mirajan Strauss, for the first time in her S-rank career as a mage, had felt overwhelming genuine fear as she witnessed her brother transform into the beast with his takeover magic, only for him to lose control. She didn't want to genuinely hurt him, and at the same time, she needed to get him to come to his senses, but both her attempts to do either had failed. Then, her sister, her sweet, precious, innocent sister Lysina had gotten into the way of the monster and herself, in an attempt to stop him. Mirajan discovered the true meaning of horror as she watched Elfman's transformed hand, almost in slow motion, descend on her sister, only for her to blink, as in a flash, a small, clandestine blue figure had appeared, and there was blood. There was a lot of blood. The spray of blood from the beast had utterly bathed Lysina, and even Mirajan found parts of it splashing against her face. Lysina screamed. The beast, her brother, had blood gushing out in a wild rampart spurt from where his head was supposed to be. Elf Ni-chan. No, it wasn't real. It wasn't real. What she was seeing wasn't real. No. The bloody head of the beast rolled to a stop in front of her. No. Then it reverted into her brother. No, 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 no. Mirajan screamed. Wendy was confused. She had been expecting the girls to be happy. She had just saved them from being killed by a monster, so why were they screaming? Why were they yelling? It was only until her nose whiffed the smell of the monster, and she noticed that it had changed. It had changed into the smell of a man. She glanced at the headless corpse of the beast, and her eyes slowly widened as it was now the headless corpse of a man. Realization dawned. There was a spike of energy. And she noticed that the woman had transformed back into her demonic-looking form and was glaring at her with such hatred Wendy had never seen before. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. The punch that connected to her chest lifted her into the air as she was sent barreling with subsonic speeds head over heels. Her body crashed through multiple outcropping layers of trees and she spat out a large glob of blood upon impact. Adding to her already pierced abdomen were his broken scapula, dislocated left shoulder and multiple fractured ribs. She coughed as she managed to glance up at the demonic form of the woman attacking her. If she didn't have her fast regeneration and sturdy body, she would have died from that attack alone. Wendy grit her teeth as she coughed up more blood. How was this fair? She didn't mean to kill her brother. All she had wanted was to make some new friends. All she wanted was to be the hero. How was she to know that the beast was a human? The woman's demonic form seemed to be charging a dark beam of magic within her hands and Wendy cradled her broken ribs as she channeled chakra into her body to speed up the healing process. I said I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, she yelled, as loud as she could, but the woman either didn't hear her or didn't care. Wendy grit her teeth even harder as the woman's attack didn't even let down. She had killed one brother to save a sister. If only she had minded her damned business and watched on, only if she had just listened to her sensei's advice about never playing hero. She stood, punching the soil as guilt and confusion hit her like a physical wave. Then, she spread her arms wide. She could probably have easily evaded the attack, or maybe even blocked or countered it. But she didn't. She was confused and most likely the woman was in such a huge amount of pain and sorrow that she wouldn't easily let go. If she fought back and beat the woman, she'd forever resent her for killing her brother. And so, she let the explosion of dark energy hit her. The explosion had blasted several trees apart and had sent her crashing into the hard stone, head over heels. Sporting a multitude of second-degree burns. In this pain-ridden state, her mind was as blurry as though she'd been subjected to too many anesthetics applied in one shot. The trees began to multiply in her vision, bending and waving as though trying to tell her to stand up, to keep moving. The evening's breeze quickened, the birds of the trees fled in haste, every denizen of the forest had retreated based on their pure animalistic instincts in the presence of a natural predator. Of course, she had no way of knowing this, as her eardrums had burst from echoing blast of the explosion. Red liquid dripping slowly down her ears, as all she could detect from around her was pure, unending silence. She managed to sit up, somehow, coughing out blood as she stared at her left arm. Or whatever was left of it as it was twisted in such a manner that arms were never supposed to go, and as all the flesh covering the entire mass of the limb had been stripped bare. Her legs were in similar broken states, bent inwards of themselves as they sported multiple burns. Her clothes were all but ripped asunder and blood poured freely from where her head had bashed strongly against a rock. Wendy saw the form of the woman descend, and then instantly, the Dragonslayer couldn't help but give her scathing remark. Are you satisfied? It seemed that the woman finally came to her senses. My God. Why you're just a sea child, why you can't even be older than T10. Her transformation fell apart as she collapsed on the floor, seemingly finally out of magical energy as tears flowed from her eyes. She grasped her head in confusion and terror, her entire body shaking. What am I doing? What have I done? That's what I'd like to know. It was like a vengeful devil had descended from the heavens. And he was not pleased. He was not pleased at all. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.